was in a place, but after extensive conversations with medical professionals at the Tarrant County Public Health Department and with doctors throughout our local hospitals, I've decided that its time has come to take a significant new step in fighting COVID-19. Today, Tarrant County is issuing a stay-at-home order for all residents in the county. All residents must remain inside their homes and should only leave their homes for essential activities and work. As a small business owner myself, I know what taking this action will mean to so many local people. But as county judge, I also know that not taking this action will mean. And while the economic challenges that will accompany this policy will be difficult, we can recover economically. And the Tarrant County Commissioners Court will do its part to spur economic growth in our county once the virus is finished. But the healthcare challenges are far more important, and the consequences are far more serious. We simply must flatten the curve and save lives. No amount of economic activity is worth the loss of life. The county will continue to offer resources to help people through these unprecedented times. But I know that people of this county are the best people in the country, and we will rise to the moment and together defeat this virus. We have been in communications with all of our mayors and with Tarrant County, and we are all on the same page as we move through this particular virus and fight this particular virus. So with this, I'll ask for the clerk to call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Got a delay.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4. J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Now, we'll get back on our notes now. Our invocation today will be by Daniel Lang, Outreach Minister from the Keller Church of Christ. Thank you so much for being here today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges. Again, thank you very much.
Almighty Father, today I want to offer up a simple prayer on behalf of this committee. Your word says to trust in you at all times, you people, and pour out our heart before you. You are a refuge for us, and you have spoken once and twice. You have heard your people hear this word from you, that power belongs to God. And because it's so, dear Lord, we just first want to say thank you, Lord, and your will be done. And though Satan ravages your creation with sickness and disease, we will trust in you and that you will make all things work together for good to those who love you. And secondly, Almighty Father, we want to pour out our heart before you and say that we are frightened, we are troubled, and we are scared for our friends, our families, and our communities, and for ourselves. And we want to thank you for hearing us, and thank you for letting us share our honest and heartfelt feelings before you, regardless of the ideals you have for our hearts and our minds and our spirits in these times. And finally, Almighty Father, because all power truly does belong to you, we do want to beseech you today for your providential care to provide for us in these troublesome times, as well as the bestowal of your wisdom and your good judgment to make the best possible decisions moving forward here today. Not driven out of fear, but out of love for one another and tempered by good common sense and truth. Lord, I pray your blessings upon Judge Whitley, all the commissioners and public servants who are gathered here today. Keep everyone safe and well so that we may continue to do your work, Father. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I
Mr. Manius, agenda announcements?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of court, since we had a special call meeting on Friday evening, as we go through the agenda today,
I know time flies when you're having fun, but it was Sunday evening.
what did I say?
Friday.
I've
Thank you for
done the
correcting
same
me.
thing.
All right, let me try this again. Since we've had a special call meeting on Sunday of this past week, we'll just leave it at that. The agenda itself is going to be somewhat different, only to the extent that we have taken action on several of these items. Also, the material that you have in your court book may change compared to what we talk about here. We intend to have a full discussion on each one of these so that you all feel comfortable. So let me give you an example. Under the county administrator section, item A2 is something that we have already approved as of Sunday. Item A5 is an item that we have already approved as of last Sunday. Item A6 is something that we are going to remove from the consent agenda and talk to you a little bit about that whenever we get to that particular situation or that item on the agenda. When we get to items 1 and 3 and 4, we're going to go into, even though like on 3 we've had some leave options that we talked about Sunday night, we told you that we were going to come back with some clarifying language because we were moving pretty quickly. So we're going to have a fairly full discussion as it relates to that also. And Your Honor, as you said, you've issued an order this morning. So the material that you have in your book as it relates to item A1 is no longer correct because we have a new order that we're going to ask the court to ratify. And so when we get to those particular items, just expect us to have a little greater conversation with you. And with that, Your Honor, I believe that's all the agenda announcements, just to make sure that on item A6, that's coming off of consent because we want to do part of that motion and not all of that motion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Manius. I'm going to do this at the beginning. I may do it in the middle, and I may do it again at the end. Look around this room, and you're going to see a lot of people who've put in a lot of hours over the last week, a lot of hours over the weekend, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate everything you've done. I was talking with our district attorney last night. It was about 9:30. She said she was about to head home, and from what I understand this morning, she left about 1 a.m. There's no telling how much sleep Vinny hasn't gotten since this thing started. But I just want to tell you, you're doing an excellent job, and I appreciate it, and I know the court appreciates everything that you're doing and have done and will be doing for the next couple of weeks, for at least the next couple of weeks. So thank you all very much. And with that, I'm going to ask for approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of March the 17th, 2020.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes. Okay. We're going to do this by roll call. Again, Commissioner Johnson is on virtual. So Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yay.
Commissioner Fickus?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
And Judge Whitley, yes. Motion passes unanimously. Proclamations and resolutions. I have a proclamation regarding DeMolay Month. It's for ratification only. I will move its approval. Have a motion second. Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yay.
Commissioner Fickus,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and Judge Whitley, yes. I now ask for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Move approval.
We've got to move approval, and we got a second. Maybe not in the same order, but that's okay.
Excluding the one item that has been withdrawn.
Correct. Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yay.
Commissioner Fickus,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and Judge Whitley, yes. Is Chris down there? I understand that Commissioner Johnson would need to say yes on each one of these votes, but instead of going through all of them, can I ask for a vote and we at least record the 4 that are here, and then I ask Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, you can put your 4 up there, and then you can ask Mr. Johnson, then you put his up there with some response.
Okay. That'll save us a little bit of time as we go forward. GK?
So, as it relates to the items on the agenda, you might remember that Sunday night we received telephone calls from citizens who wanted to voice or to make a statement as related to the agenda items. So, working with the district attorney's office, we had posted on our website, and up until 10:15 today, that people who wanted to make a comment could register with our staff, and that we would call them so they could have that if they wanted to talk, or if they just simply wanted to give a statement that to be read in the record. We have had calls, and so, Your Honor, I think as we go into this, that you'll need to see if there's any of those that want to speak on any of these agenda items.
So are we gonna, you said you've had calls, are we gonna be waiting for calls, or are you gonna give me a list of people I need
It's
to call?
my understanding that we have the sheets are ready for those that we received. And
Okay.
so they should be bringing them up to you right now.
Walla?
But so GK, you're saying that we were allowing public comment up until 10:15?
Yes, we
Okay.
posted that on the internet.
Okay. And how would the public know that they had until 10:15 to submit?
We put it on the internet, and which is a requirement that we do.
Sure.
And that's what we did. Most people, if they would go to our agenda item,
Sure.
and they would see it right there.
So I would like to suggest that as we move forward, if we make any future changes to how we're receiving public comment, that I would love to know so that I can let folks know how they can submit that comment.
And I will, first of all, let me apologize for that. We start working on this late last night, and so, but your comments are right on target, and we'll make sure that happens. Okay, great. Okay, members of court, if we can go to item number 1. We're requesting this motion. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court ratify and consent to the continuation of the second amended declaration of local disaster issued by the county judge on March 21st, 2020 for the period of the time stated within, and also to ratify and consent to the continuation of the declaration which the county judge has issued this morning.
I move approval with a comment. I want to thank the county judge, the mayors of Fort Worth, Arlington, and other cities who participated and collaborated on this decision. Our health experts who gave considerable input to the process. Those of you who were listening to the Commissioners Court meeting on Sunday night know that Commissioner Allen and I passionately argued in favor of a shelter-in-place order rather. That's what the judge signed this morning. Though it's called a stay-at-home order, it is in effect a shelter-in-place order. It's the right thing for us to have done. Dr. Fauci, the foremost infectious disease expert in the country, said a few days ago that we're always behind where we think we are. This is an attempt to help catch us up. This is something that we must do and that all of us must adhere to if we're going to flatten the curve. Otherwise, our health systems will be overwhelmed as this virus gets out of control. We all must do this. All of us must do this to have any chance of getting out in front on this virus. And I thank Judge Whitley for getting there.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll say I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Brooks. I will tell you that in talking with our healthcare officials, I've said that this is ever changing. We used to be looking at it on a daily basis. We're now almost looking at it on a minute by minute basis. As we talked about on Sunday, at that point in time, our healthcare professionals were not there. As of Monday, they were there. And they were there this morning as we had our press conference with Mayor Williams, Mayor Price, and myself. And they also stood up and said, this is the time we need to be moving forward and making it to the next step. So I appreciate that. Commissioner Fickus, you have anything?
Well, I guess you might refer to this as shelter-in-place light. The stay-at-home, work safe is what I will call it, and so I think that we're in a different situation today than we were 3 days ago, 2 days ago. I think we had 35 cases last night, or yesterday, I'm sorry. So I think for the 2 weeks, I think this is till the 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So hopefully this will help us stem the tide of this horrible disease.
So, Your Honor, just to make sure that we announce this in a public setting, the executive order that you executed this morning, it takes effect at 11:59 p.m. today, the 24th, and it remains in effect until April 7th, 2020.
So I'm not sure if we have public comment on this tonight, but I have a couple points of concern with the order that I want to make sure that are clarified. So if we have people who are waiting to speak, I'd like for them to have that opportunity first.
We have some comments that I am to read. I also have a couple of calls that I will call them back. And we're going to all learn how to do this together. I'll read these in just a moment. Come with, and let's see if we get this.
Judge, is this posted on the website at this time?
That's correct.
Okay.
This, you mean in the order?
Yes.
Now, the order is up. There seemed to be a little bit of hesitation on Mr. Manius's face, so I better check and make sure.
But we told them to post it. I'm making an assumption that they have. If not, we'll make sure that it gets up there. They're in the process of posting this order now.
Okay. So, here we go. Do I need to dial one? Okay. If I'm dialing 682, is that, I don't have to dial anything else? We'll find out in a minute. Yes, sir.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
That was an attempt to call Damon Price, so I will make another attempt shortly. Next is, I'm going to be calling Brian Jennings.
This is Brian Jennings.
Brian, this is Judge Whitley, and you had submitted an audience participation on our order. I'm going to let you go ahead and repeat your name and your address, and then you have 3 minutes in which to make comments.
Okay, thank you, Judge Whitley. This is Brian Jennings, and I live at 5940 Highcrest in Watauga, Texas, and that's 76148. The reason why I asked to address the court today is, first of all, I do want to thank you for everything the Commissioner's Court is doing to protect this, our county. I do, certainly understand the gravity of the situation and everything, and I definitely understand some of the measures that needed to be placed. The reason why I wanted to address is I am a little bit concerned about some of the wholesale categories that have been placed on types of businesses that have been closed. For example, my barber has a one-chair barber shop, and he could do, appointments only, for example, and it could be, one-on-one. So, that would be it's certainly once the, shelter in place is lifted and stuff, I'm hoping that the Commissioner's Court will be, could take those kind of considerations in place that, when they, for example, when and not just take a whole business category and close it, but maybe the density that population exists. Another thing would be like gymnasiums. For example, my daughter's, softball practice facility got, totally closed. And, a lot of times, for example, me and her would be the only ones in there, and it would be totally vacant. So that's, what I wanted to, bring to the Commissioner's Court's attention. And that's really, all I had to say. I know there's been a lot of concern about churches, for example, and, there's some people even question whether this is, constitutional to close it, but that could be, another thing that could be consideration. Judge Whitley, you and I go to the same church at First Methodist Hurst, and, for example, full well that it's a very large church, and I don't think we would be having church anyway, because we could do the teleconference and stuff, but if we wanted to, if we put, 20 people in that sanctuary, then it would be a very lower restriction, low density, and it would still allow very good social distance. So that's all the comments that I had. I certainly understand the measures that you have, but I kind of ask that, we, especially once the shelter is in place is lifted and the restrictions, are lifted, that we consider the category and the actual density in the business instead of just the type of business that it is. And the other thing that's very important to me, it's very important for me to keep my kids, exercising and outdoor activities. So I would really like to avoid any kind of, restrictions on, like closing the parks. For example, we go out and we walk the trails and Watauga, and we've been staying very far away from everybody. So that's what I like you to consider as you go forward with any kind of further deliberations that you have, is to try to keep the parks open and think about the density limits on business instead of just closing the whole scale, business based on what it's, the type of business that it is.
Brian, thank you very much for your concerns and for your thoughts. Okay, I need, let me see here, okay, I'm back. The next one is, I think that's Jolynn Cox. I'll be calling you. Get you a chair. Because otherwise you're going to be real tired before this thing's over with.
Hello.
Jolynn Cox, this is Judge Whitley. You had submitted an audience participation form. Now, you had also sent in an email, so I'm going to take this, whatever comments you're making, we'll take care of both of those.
It will. Thank you very much, Your Honor. First, I wish to thank you and the others who have decided jointly to move us forward and have 70% of Texans covered by the same protections. I think that's going to be important for giving us a sense of security about what we're supposed to do and knowing that we are being protected. I also want to thank you for being so forward-looking with this, but the concerns I have are with testing. It does appear to me that we will be safer when we have full diagnostic information or better diagnostic information than we now have. If we cannot get the tests from the federal government, I think we might consider saying whether just take initiative locally. Maybe Alcon or other persons will be able to manufacture the test kits we need. My concerns have been for my friends who work in the healthcare industry and then for everyone. We need enough testing to have good diagnostic information to know exactly what to do. And I think that it may be a good idea going forward to look at the possibility of having places where those who are infected may be put into isolation. I saw something that LA, Los Angeles, had taken up space in a closed hotel and was providing somebody to bring in food and pick up laundry. The point really is that if you have a family of 5 and you have to sequester someone in one room at home, the chances that the other 4 people in that family may become infected, I think, are higher than they would be if we had an isolation tent.
1 minute, 1 minute left, please, Ms. Cox.
Pardon me?
1 minute remains on your 3 minutes.
All right. Well, those are my 2 suggestions: testing and look into getting isolation for people who have been identified as infected. And thank you for all that you are doing, and best of luck.
Ms. Cox, thank you so much for calling in and for making your statements. We appreciate it. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next is Bert Wright. I will be calling you. Yes, Bert, this is Judge Whitley. You had indicated you would like to speak, so you have 3 minutes. Please.
Oh, no. Judge, I don't want to speak. I'm just wanting to listen to the conference.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
You have a blessed one.
Thank you. Okay, next I will be calling, I'm going to make another attempt at Damon Price. That's not Damon.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Next will be, I'll call Gabriel Guess.
Not here to pick up right now, so leave a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
We'll try Gabriel again in a moment. Next is Heather Boyne. I don't know if I've gotten that one wrong.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Okay, that was Heather. So we'll try her again in a few moments. Now I'm going to go back because Gabriel did indicate that he wanted. Well, we were trying to call him, so I'm going to continue to leave it at that. I've got a few that are Reed. Chris, let me ask you a question. If I've got a number from them on this, can I, or do I have to read what they said if they've got a telephone number for me to call?
If they do not want to address the court, are you saying, Judge, or are you saying if they?
Well, they want me to, I guess they're saying read at the top, so I'll need to read that into the record. Okay, then I'm going to go back and read Heather's. I am in full support of comprehensive stay-at-home order to protect the health and safety of Tarrant County residents. We need residents that are not performing essential job functions to stay at home. We need our hospital and medical professionals to be able to manage the influx of patients and get tools they need to help save lives. I know that the cities and populations in this county are resilient and Tarrant County strong. Any economic effects of this is something we can bounce back from. We must protect public safety and health, and our economies will collapse if our healthcare institutions collapse, because we didn't do enough to keep our people from catching an illness and ending up in the hospitals. Okay, the next statement that I'm going to read is from, I'm going to read Gabriel Guess. Shelter in place. Why are we going to destroy the economy of Tarrant County for something that has a 98% recovery rate? None of the numbers you are using are scientific. They are probable, not factual or realistic. We must live our life. We are smart enough to know what to do to keep us healthy. Saving one life is bad logic. Then closing liquor stores, stop abortions, shut it down for the flu, but we don't but we don't, so I do not buy this saving one life idea. I've read that one into the record. Next is another read-only, but it says first name T, address, last name P, and so with that not completed form, I'm not going to read that one into the record until the attorneys stand up and tell me I got to, and they're not.
Can I advance that one, Judge?
You don't trust me there, huh? Okay, the next is Misty Beck, or Misty Beck. I do not wish to address the court. Okay, family law policy still in effect. That's a question mark. And I would say the answer to that is yes. And the attorneys aren't jumping at me, so I guess that's correct. Will the courts remain open?
They are open, but on a limited basis.
The courts are open on a limited basis, and that was our district clerk. Will child exchange and visitation still be active?
That has been slowed down, but I don't have a up-to-date pronouncement on that, given this order today.
Okay,
I will get the answer, though.
thank you.
I've had that same question brought to me by a judge in the family court.
Okay. The next is Devin Pipes. The statement is shelter in place, not need. I think it's no need is a mistake. Okay, I do not have any other forms at this time. So with that, I am going to, are there any other comments from the court at this time?
Yes.
Go right ahead, Commissioner Howell.
So on page 2, number 9, I'm kind of confused by this regarding public and private gatherings. So I guess whoever drafted this, if we could just talk through this particular statement. Because my concern is we don't have a limit on the gathering if it's in a household or living unit, which I understand why we wouldn't, but then what's to keep someone from having a party, for instance? Which I hear that there is some of that going on, so.
I guess I would ask if Leslie is the one that helped with this, and we talked back and forth, so.
Commissioner Allen, the question was relating to number 9. That statement is intended to not prohibit gathering of people that live in a house together or in a unit together, but the restrictions on travel would prevent other people who do not live in that household from coming to the household. That would violate another portion of the order, which would address the concern that you stated about having a house party.
So I know that we laid out in the order that for item number 10 regarding all elective medical, surgical, and dental procedures. I won't read that in its entirety, but then later on under definitions 15D1, just want to make it clear. So are we saying that if a provider deems that a procedure is clinically necessary or that is essential, then the provider could then conduct that procedure?
That is correct.
Okay. So I have my marked up version, which is maybe slightly different than what was printed here, so I'm trying to line it up right quick. So I've heard some conversations about dealerships and their ability to not necessarily remain open to the public, but still be able to conduct business. And I think that's especially important given that we don't have an integrated, comprehensive public transportation system for our county. And so if we're talking about people being able to still get to work, that may mean them having to get a car or whatever that they previously were relying upon. They may not be able to still rely on it. So can we speak to dealerships?
I would say what we're talking about there, first off, we've said that the service departments can remain open. Secondly, we can say that you're more than welcome to purchase online. I've talked with Senator Hancock yesterday. He called to basically bring forward two particular areas. One, the title companies, where he said that based on prior legislation, that could be done completely online and did not require someone to have to come in order to be able to close on a home. And he implied that I believe that he implied that the same thing could happen with the purchase of automobiles. So all the paperwork could be signed online, and then someone could actually deliver the car to them, or again, they could come in. I will tell you that businesses are figuring out ways to still be able to stay open, but not invite and not have the public in. Many of them are going to online or telephone orders, and then they will come by. And I was looking at one of the office supply places yesterday, and they were basically saying, this is what I need. They'd come up to the door. Person would come to the door, ask, who are you? What's your order? If they had that, they would allow them to come in and to pay for it and to pick it up and leave. And the thing I saw about it was they had a line. They had 2 or 3 people in, but they had dots that said, okay, this is 6 foot, this is social distancing, don't get any closer. And nobody was allowed to browse within the store.
So then further on under that same section where we discuss financial institutions, and I'm bringing up particularly payday lending, I'm assuming they fall under consumer lenders?
They actually fall under an alternative financial institution.
Okay. And so what?
That would be payday lending, that would be pawn shops, that would be check cashing, places, things along that line.
And so what directive are we giving them?
They're open.
And are there considerations for price gouging there?
There are considerations, I would say, for price gouging throughout the process. And I would encourage anyone who feels like that they're seeing that happen or occurring to, the AG is the one that is actually going to end up having to prosecute that. But if you observe it, then who should they call?
If we could get that number at some future point and announce it, because we were talking about potentially the consumers that utilize those businesses obviously are potentially already in a financially vulnerable situation, so we don't want for them to become even more vulnerable as a result of the pandemic.
And I would say, Commissioner Allen, I have had conversations yesterday with not only folks from the state legislature, but also the federal, and encourage them to do whatever they might be able to do to encourage not a higher interest rate, but maybe even a lower interest rate. And again, for those folks who abused, the folks here at this time, that they take stiff and quick action on that. And again, especially since the Federal Reserve has basically lowered the rate that it's charging banks to 0. are very near zero for this.
And I appreciate those comments, but we're also talking about folks who historically perhaps were not privy to those type of rates and opportunities. So,
What about,
If I can just add to that discussion, so price gouging is in the purview of the State Attorney General's office. However, in paragraph 14 of the executive order, we specifically say that people cannot charge more for goods and services than they did on March the 16th of 2020. That makes it a violation of this ordinance, this order. And so by doing that, I would say that you could report that to law enforcement.
thank you.
that was making sure that she very quickly made it to law enforcement and not to the DA's office.
Well, we don't do arrests.
Right, y'all can't do arrests, that's exactly right.
We don't answer 911.
So next under that same section would be real estate transactions, and obviously I know that we don't want to cause any action or put in course any action that would keep people from being able to purchase a home or sell a home, make the changes that they need to make in order to respond and take care of their families. But have we had conversations with the real estate community about how they are handling or intend to handle open houses, in-person open houses? I know we're saying that as much, well, I'll just read it. Services related to current real estate transactions, as much business as possible shall be conducted with web-based technology to limit in-person contact.
I will tell you, the folks that I have talked with, I have said no showing of homes, no open houses. You can complete the transaction, and as I said earlier, that purchase and closing of that purchase can all occur without the individual having to go into the title company's office. That's a good question. I mean, I've had that, like I said, I've had that question a couple of times.
Sure.
And we'll never put in writing everything that people want to ask us. But we've tried to cover as much as we possibly could.
Sure. I just want to make sure that it's clear so that people know how to conduct their businesses, their lives, especially as we're asking them to be personally responsible, but then telling them how to do it at the same time. Okay, so last is, unless I missed it, we haven't addressed weddings, which I'm very sensitive to the fact that people we've addressed funerals, and we've addressed worship services, things that obviously are very personal to folks that represent milestones and the history of a family. But so what about weddings?
I would say on that one that in our previous order, we had, basically, if you're outdoors, it was supposed to be no more than 10. And, I had a conversation with our sheriff, and one of their patrol folks actually had to go in and kind of break up a wedding. That probably is not the right way to do it, so y'all that are writing what I just said down, let's go ahead and scratch through that line. But basically ask the folks that were in a cul-de-sac, and it was probably 80 or 90 people, to please, cut it down to a very small number, less than 10, and then maybe have the celebration at a later date. So that should not be occurring, and we really shouldn't be doing it in any of our buildings, because again, what we're saying is, stay at home, go to work, go back home. Don't party.
And I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that that's necessarily a clear message to folks. And so we're saying try not to have a wedding, or?
I don't know if I necessarily want to put it that way, but
okay.
Just go ahead, Sharon.
Let me just add to that. I don't know that it's not a clear message to people, because the incident that the sheriff was involved in was called in by neighbors who saw it going on and were not okay with it because of the size. So,
and I would say the same. I mean, basically, I would say the same thing. And I think in our buildings, we need to be exercising what we're saying, and I don't think we ought to be conducting weddings.
Okay. Well, for the sake of other things that I need to say. I'll move on from that. But I think we'll see if we receive feedback from the public that it's unclear to them.
We will.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that because we can't cover. We have also included a table. I had heard on the last order that we put out that the table was very helpful, but there were still a lot of questions. My office was inundated yesterday. I appreciate the county clerk allowing some of her folks that had been in the passport office to come over and help us answer the calls. I can tell you the phone's ringing off the wall over right now. So again, and we're just going to have to try to do the best we can at clarifying this.
Sure. I mean, and I appreciate everyone's efforts. I think if we talk about, the hesitancy of using the term shelter in place versus stay at home versus all the iterations that we've heard, is if we can provide clear direction for people, that actually is going to help to relieve some of the panic and anxiety, because people are trying to figure out how they're going to care for their families. They want to do the right thing, and we need to make sure that we make it clear to them so that they can do that.
That's a very good point. I mean, it really is. I will tell you the reason that as we've talked with judges around the state, especially in the larger counties near the coast, shelter in place has a very specific definition as it pertains to for like hurricanes or tornadoes or things along that type lines. And so we've really moved away from the shelter in place wording because that means drastically different things to folks near the coast.
The coast, even El Paso.
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
Unfortunate tragedy last August, and I appreciate that. I think it needs to be made clear to our community what it is that we're saying, and then even if we have a different phraseology or however we're terming it, that they get what it is exactly that we're asking them to do, and in this case, ordering them to do.
Commissioner Allen, I would point out that in paragraph 6, the wording that we use is not permissive. It is mandatory, stating that people shall stay in place unless it falls within a reason permitted under these circumstances. Your question about a wedding is not permissible under this order, under any section that I can see. And so it is a mandatory language, and hopefully that will send a clear message.
Okay.
And please, I know I have had to pay for, I have had the pleasure of paying for 2 or 3 weddings. And I know how much planning went into it. I know how much excitement was centered around it. None of these are easy decisions.
Sure.
Even with, we're asking folks with funerals, a small service right now, and have your big celebration at a later time.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, and even when you talk about weddings, you talk about all of the vendors that are associated with it, and so we know that the decisions that we're making have significant impact. To that end, I want to make sure that our this order, future orders are in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese.
Yes.
So do we already have that going? What's the timeline to make sure that that's posted?
By this evening.
Okay, great.
I have asked that everything we do from this point out be translated into exactly what you said, Spanish, Vietnamese, and English.
Great. And I know obviously that our public health information is already provided in multiple languages, but obviously given the importance and the impact of this order, it's important that everyone understand it.
The other thing that I would like for us to try to do, and I know we've been doing plenty of things, signing. I would like for us to have someone, if we can, to be here in the future to sign our meetings so that those that are hearing impaired may be able to understand what we're saying. Or the other alternative is closed caption. So whichever would work or whichever would be easiest, then please let's see if we can work toward that. And again, I really don't want to be adding too much to what I know our staff's heavy burden is. But I was at the City of Fort Worth this morning. They did it. They've done it at the city of Arlington, and I think we really need to move in that direction.
We'll get there.
I agree wholeheartedly. I did thank you, Leslie. I
Thank
don't have
you.
any
Mary
more
Louise,
specific
did you have a
questions.
comment?
So we've been issuing marriage licenses and they're good for 90 days. So then a couple asked one of my managers, you know, if this goes on and on and on, are we going to be able to get another license for free? The state has not said that. You have 90 days. So we, prior to today, have been telling couples, because their weddings are getting canceled, you have 90 days, perhaps go get married with the JP, you know, solidify the license for the state of Texas and then have your ceremony later. So my understanding moving forward today, we're not telling them that for 2 weeks. They are locked in. They are not going to encourage people to go see a JP because this is not a necessary essential function, correct?
That's the way we've written it right now, and if
So
you
for
have
2
input,
weeks,
if you
that's
have
what we're
questions
telling.
about that, or if we need to discuss that further, then let's discuss it further, but otherwise, that's where we are right now.
Because Judge Whitley, we have appointments lined up for weeks now. Since we've closed our doors, I mean, it's every 20 minutes a marriage license, and now we're changing this up saying for 2 weeks, you will not, in Tarrant County, have the option to make that appointment with the JP. That's my message going forward to the team.
Well, I'm not sure if they're good for 90 days.
They are.
That's up to you.
No,
from
the
that
state law says 90 days. That
Okay.
license is good, but we're saying in Tarrant County, we were counseling them prior today saying, look, if you want to make sure that's valid, go find your JP and get married. But today we're saying for 2 weeks, everybody stay home.
But that doesn't mean they can't get a license.
They still can make an appointment and you can still come get your license,
Correct.
which is valid for 90 days. But we're going to have a different message for 14 days.
Correct.
Okay?
Well, no, they can still come and get their license. They just
Absolutely.
can't get married.
You still just call and get an appointment and you can get your license, but it's backed up. Okay? Thank you.
Legal? Let me ask a question. If they need to get the license in the county they're going to be married in or in the county that they reside?
There's a no travel. Yes, I would need to look at the.
No, there's not. We are not preventing anybody from traveling outside of this county for work or things along that lines.
Is Dallas preventing it?
I don't know what Dallas is doing. If someone gets a license in Tarrant County, can they go to Parker County or Hood County or someplace else and be married?
Yes.
The attorney is telling me yes, so get our license and
State license.
do whatever you need to do. Good. That's an alternative.
I would think that weddings ought to be on the same footing as funerals.
So what you're saying
You
is,
can have it with 2 or 3 people present, either a minister or a justice of the peace or any person authorized to perform a wedding. You just can't have a crowd.
So, DA, currently with the funerals, do we have a number there?
Yes.
Is it 10?
Yes.
No more than 10? 10 or less?
It is. No more than 10.
Okay.
And so far as I know, the funeral homes are only doing graveside services
Okay.
by their own election.
So what I hear, I believe I hear the court member saying,
Let's do it.
that the weddings can be done as long as there are no more than 10 people, including whoever it is that's performing the ceremony, as long as there's no more than that at that particular time. And that's something
I would think that's fair.
Okay, so when we vote, I will consider, what do I need to do? Do I just need to say we're going to change that particular point?
Yes, when you make your motion, you just make sure that you make it to approve, but you make that correction in your motion with the change of adding whatever language.
Your motion. Okay.
Yeah, as long as all y'all are on the same page on how we do it, but we'll do that in a minute when we get through if there's no other questions. So,
Judge, are you saying that you want to add a section expressly allowing weddings?
what I would probably do is in the section where we talk about funerals, I think I'm going to stop right there.
We will leave it to the district attorney's office to structure the language.
So if you look at funeral services, it says funeral homes, crematories, cemeteries may operate.
Where are you?
I am on the bottom of what I have is page 5. It's paragraph 16.
And then DA, if you could use the mic, I just want to make sure folks that are
1613. Paragraph, subparagraph 13. It's the bottom.
There's no such animal on this document I'm looking at.
So it's paragraph 15, definitions, subparagraph D, and subparagraph 13 on funeral services. And so I would suggest that what we'll do is do wedding services or weddings and do that exact same information, not more than 10 employees or 10. What we'll do is 10 people, not employees, and we'll change the funeral services also, and we'll add the social distancing to both.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Your Honor, just a clarification on behalf of my fellow judges. You had earlier, as the beginning of this discussion opened, you had said not use a county building. Is that?
That's still there.
Okay, so not use a county building, 10 people maximum.
Including
everybody.
Providing
everybody. And social distancing.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
So is that clear? They can do it, no more than 10 people, including the thing, and whoever's presiding over the deal, not in county buildings.
Not in a county building.
Not in a county building, because again, from that perspective, I think we're exposing members of our county family, and I think that can, if somebody wants to do it, they can do it outside, or they can do it in another thing. But I want
That was
social
my
distance.
question. Not in a county building, but permissible on county property.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. They can do it
Mr.
in
Wilder?
the parking lot or on the lawn.
Your Honor, in response to the question about visitation, I'm quoting from the sign on the supervised visitation that occurs in the family law building. That has been canceled and will reopen April the 17th. The other thing that I would hope the listeners are seeing would be on my website, which is embedded in the county website. If they go to tarrantcounty.com, click on government, click on district clerk, I have all the new orders that came from the judges in one place on my website. There was one signed yesterday by all the family judges.
If it has to do with COVID-19, it should not be on your website. It should be on our COVID-19 website.
It's my understanding it is. I put it all in one place
Thank you
so the
very much.
lawyers could
Thank you, Tom.
go
Thank
to
you
one
very much.
place and the citizens.
So I'm good with the order, but I just have some general comments that I'd like to make, but I don't,
Let me
should
ask-
we amend this?
Yeah, let me see if there's anybody else who has any comments with regards to the order before we get to just general comments.
Here's just a thought, and I'm getting some notes from people about what are essential businesses, and if any business can operate with 10 people and not have the public come in, can they operate?
I think they have to look under the definitions of essential businesses. Now,
Collin County,
Collin County is
Collin
completely different than ours.
I know, but
In
that's
Collin
what-
County, their judge indicated to me last night that if someone was employed, that was an essential job.
That's what anybody that can operate with within the 10-person rule and distancing could operate.
And the reason I don't think that works, and it's the reason we originally had occupancy in there, you could put 10 people in a Dairy Queen, and they might not be able, and that's probably, well, it's a good one to use because they're all closed. And you couldn't keep the 10 feet of the social distancing. You could put 10 people in a Target store. Well, that's another one that's not a good use because they're open all the time. A lot of it depends upon the distancing, but what we've just simply said is read our essential businesses. There are going to be tons of questions, and we will be here till next Tuesday if we start trying to hit all of them. And Commissioner, I understand what you're saying, but ask the folks who helped us draft. I mean, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out whether to write it to indicate who was closed or to write it to who we intended to be open, knowing that there will be folks who will constantly want to know that.
I'm not talking about businesses that are going to have customers come in.
I understand.
May I,
I'm talking about a business that has to maintain equipment. Maybe they have to
We've not closed down any service.
Huh?
I don't think we've closed down. Okay,
So-
let me ask, now please, and then we'll get back to it.
Paragraph 7 specifically deals with the non-essential businesses, because I think in drafting these and working with the attorneys for Fort Worth and Arlington, we're not trying to put people out of business. So non-essential businesses still can continue with their minimum basic operations, which they're allowed to do. They're allowed to travel to do it. And those are the operations necessary to maintain security, upkeep and maintenance of the premises, the equipment and the inventory, including the care of maintenance of livestock and animals. IT operations that include facilitating employees working from home, facilitating online and call-in sales performed by employees in a store or facility that's closed to the public, and in-store repair services performed by employees in a store or facility closed to the public. So the idea is that while there are the essential businesses that are open, the non-essential businesses we're trying to keep in business.
I think that will keep a lot of people open.
Yeah, I think C especially.
It'll keep them in
I think
business,
that might.
but not necessarily open.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Commissioner Johnson, if you have any comments with regards to specific provisions, we're going to address those now, and then as soon as we think we're finished with that, then we'll go to kind of just any general comments that you want to make before we vote on this. Okay.
No, I don't have any comments. I'm monitoring.
Thank you, JD. Okay, so as I understand it, the only provision that we're adding to this document that we signed earlier, or that I signed earlier, is one that reads as the following. Y'all tell me how it reads.
It reads,
Get your mic.
weddings may be held, but no more than 10 persons may be present at the same time. Social distancing is required, and I believe that you added, and they may not be held in a county building.
Correct. Okay, with that, then we'll move to just general comments at this time before we go to a vote.
My general comment is that the thrust of this order is stay at home. Any other interpretation is not welcome. Stay at home unless you meet one of the exceptions that is specifically spelled out in the order. Stay at home.
Commissioner Allen, any?
Yes. Well, first off, I have to say that I'm really excited that I've been able to convince my 84-year-old grandmother to stay at home. She is a strong Texas woman, cancer survivor, and I think she always understood the seriousness of it, but obviously given her age, it's important for her to stay out and about and to feel connected. And though she lives with family, you know, it's important that she's able to get around and do her own thing. So I have a heart for especially our older residents who they understand the importance of it, and it probably causes them a certain level of angst to be at home.
I'm one of those.
But I did feel a certain sense of accomplishment when I talked to her yesterday evening, and she said, well, I'll just take it on a week-by-week basis. So there you go. But I want to be sure also, and this is at the extreme risk of missing so many folks, but to talk about those that are especially vulnerable to perhaps their concerns and experiences being overlooked. And I'll say this even at the risk of seeming to even placate folks. My heart is in the right place. First, I want to say to Asian Americans, particularly Chinese Americans, that I'm so sorry for the racism that you've encountered. As a black woman in Tarrant County in Texas in the United States, I encounter it on a very regular basis. It doesn't surprise me, but that doesn't make it any less disappointing, and it hurts. So I would encourage everyone, as we are talking about caring for one another, that we practice kindness when it comes to those who are encountering continued racism, and then those that are encountering at this new level of racism. I have to speak to the closing of nail salons, hair salons, personal care services. There was conversation about that these should be closed, and I agree that they should be closed because you are, under most circumstances, in close proximity to the person who is providing the personal care service. I will say that and this is not a blanket statement for all women, but for some women, that's a form of self-care. And so that's lacking, potentially now. But then also, it's mainly women who perform these services. These are their businesses and how they care for their families. And so I see you, I hear you. For those experiencing a loss of income, it really doesn't matter if it's a little income or a lot of income, whether it's from an hourly job, a part-time job, a side hustle, consulting, your entire business, that my heart goes out to you, and I pray that you will recover. I know what it's like to have utilities cut off, to eat spoiled food, if it's even there, to wear dirty clothes, and the list goes on. And there are some experiences that I cannot personally speak to, but we know that the measures that we're taking are going to cause suffering. We hope that in the end that it will be less suffering than if we did nothing at all. I want to speak to those that are at homes that are in homes that are unsafe, whether that's domestic violence, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, the list goes on. My heart goes out to you. For those who struggle with isolation, there are a lot of memes that are going around addressing the extroverts who are feeling a critical kind of, punch. That's not the right word, but I can't think of a better one. I'm actually naturally an introvert. That may surprise some people, but me and a good book or a long walk or a run or whatever. But so my heart goes out to the extroverts and really anyone else that's experiencing isolation that is of grave concern to them, great concern. And my heart also goes out to the healthcare workers, clinicians, those who provide direct patient care, our first responders, law enforcement. Many of you know that I was an EMT for 3.5 years. I was an EMT during the time of Hurricane Katrina, and I had nightmares for 2 years after that, in seeing the pain and the suffering that folks who were transported from Louisiana to Texas, to North Texas. And we have to do everything that we can to care for those who are on the front line and get them the resources that we need. So I know that I've left some folks out. I do want to be sure to thank my team, the county team, the judges team, the county administrators team, everyone at the county who has showed up to work every day, even amidst these concerns. And for those folks who feel the best is staying at home, I understand that as well. I think we all have to make sure that we are caring for ourselves, and in making healthy decisions, that's a direct correlation to our trying our best to keep our immune system strong. So thank you.
Commissioner Fickus?
I also want to thank the county team, the team in my office, but the county team, the administration's office, and Judge Whitley. You have been nonstop for probably 2 weeks on this, and I know that this has taken a toll on you and your family, and I can understand that. The commitment you have to the citizens that live here in Tarrant County, and thank you very much for all that you've done. And the same thing goes for, I know that we've got a team here in Tarrant County working together with our cities. I've been on most of the phone calls and listened to the mayors and the city managers and the school districts and what they're doing and how they're working together to make this, hopefully, this devil that has attacked us to go away at some point. Also, the most vulnerable people I see are our senior citizens. They're the ones that are the most susceptible to catching this disease and suffering the most. They're the ones that the families need to, and we as a community need to pay the most attention to, I believe. And for no other reason, I'm not happy with this whole thing, but for what it will do for our seniors is probably the main reason why I'm going to vote for it. So,
and my apologies, I left off some important resource, which I know that we have on our county website, but I want to read it for those who are listening or maybe watching this later, is the MHMR 24/7 Eye Care hotline. You can call or text local 817-335-3022. Toll free is 1-800-866-2465. And then for those with hearing impairments, 817-469-4488. And I know this information is already out there, but as we speak to very real concerns that people have and the stress and anxiety that may be related to them, is I ask that you please, and one of the things that you have to do in taking care of yourself is if you need to talk it out, if you need to get it out, then we have very talented and committed staff with MHMR that are standing by ready to assist.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson. Any comment at this time? Okay. Yes, sir.
And final comment. This Commissioner's Court is composed of some of the most public-spirited and compassionate individuals with whom I've ever had the privilege of working. Adopting an order of this kind is extremely difficult because it will impose sacrifices on each and every one of us. But know this, the sacrifices that we are asking you to make and that we're committing to making ourselves individually and personally are all for the public good. If we can do this thing for the next 2 to 4 weeks, we have a chance of getting ahead of this virus and knocking it down quickly so that it does not take root in our community and threaten to do permanent damage to our health, the health of our families, the health of our community, the health of our economy. These are things that we must do. And if we all do them together and at the same time for the same period of time, if we let our better angels prevail and cause us to do the right things, we've got a chance of pulling out of this thing more quickly and stronger as a community for the effort.
Thank you, Commissioner. Excuse me, as we're closing now, what I want to say is on all the calls we have, most of the time you're hearing me talk, but I want to, as was said earlier, I want to reassure you and tell you that all the commissioners are on most all of these calls because of state law. They cannot comment. And so I just want you to know that they're active and that they're very much involved with this. Commissioner Allen, I want to thank you for your mention of the MHMR hotline. People are stressed. We need to make sure they know where to go to be able to talk with a professional and to hopefully help get them through this situation. I would also encourage you to go to tarrantcounty.com. We have a red box that talks about the COVID-19, and we have all kinds of different things on there from where forms you can fill out, nurse lines where you can call with regards to seeing if you qualify to be screened or tested. I want, and we're already beginning to see the tremendous generosity of the folks in Tarrant County. What we're seeing from folks is they're volunteering to deliver meals to older adults, to school children, to a lot of different folks, and that's happening all over the place. We need to, if you're healthy and you can get out and give blood, the hospitals are going to be in need of blood. So we need to help in that particular regard. I also want to thank Commissioner Allen for reminding us that people basically find our information in different ways. And so we need to look at, and we've challenged our public information folks to look at different ways to get the information out, the different social platforms. And I want to thank her for reminding us that not all people are like me, who gets most of it from the paper or from the television. So thank you for that. Again, we're going to get through this. Stay positive, and we're going, and help your neighbor. This is a time to connect. Sheriff, I see you standing, and I got a feeling that's because you want to say something.
Just this. is being the instruments of the policy that you're passing. I want you to that the public to know that absolutely at the top of the list is compassion and mercy and broadest of discretion and absolute last resort before any law enforcement action be taken on any of this. And we are working with our elected constables as well, and they're assisting us because there are people under stress and those type of calls are going up. And we're hopefully going to be able to handle those in place and not take any action. Now, if people are hurting their children, we will hold them accountable, and that is happening, and we will hold them accountable for that. But other things we are trying to mitigate at every level with the judicial, with the jail. We're having triage outside the jail before anybody ever comes in. And so we're doing all those mitigating factors to keep things safe and our people safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff, while we've got you here, I want to ask you if you are doing everything in your power to empty your jail of misdemeanors.
Our jail population is the lowest it's been in 2 years, and we are working with judicial to do that right now. And we've worked with the DA's office and judicial, where we believe tomorrow that we'll have electronic pleadings from the jail so that we can speed up the issue and make sure people have their process and that they can be gone. We have been able to, as of today, as we speak, our Cold Spring facilities is completely empty. And that facility is being set aside for emergency services if we need an emergency hospital or whatever. So it's going to be there. And yet the short answer is yes. We're working on making sure with regards to a very strong eye on anybody that's a threat to the community.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'm going to ask for the vote. Commissioner Johnson, are you in favor? *6, sir. Okay, the motion right now is 4, and show Commissioner Johnson as abstaining. He may come back.
No, show me as voting yes.
So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, JD. Okay, with that, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. And so I'd like to ask that you come back in here about 5 minutes until noon. Thank you. As far as, I know the press is here, I know I just signed the order that showed the amendment in there for weddings. We're in the process of getting that delivered to the clerk, but also printed off, and we'll have copies for all of y'all momentarily in that regard. So just expect that any moment, and thank y'all for your patience on that.
Your Honor, if we could go to the briefing section and take up the issue of current and emerging health issues. Dr. Tenasia is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the court. I'll start with an acknowledgement and really a thank you to you all for your leadership through this tough time. As you can understand, and you alluded earlier, that these were very tough decisions. And, I also want to assure the public that these are based in science and a balancing act of how do you apply these scientific decisions to a larger population. And hopefully my presentation today will give some insight into the discussions that we've had with you all on why we're here today taking these necessary steps for our community. So with the global situation, and we'll look at the current numbers because they update literally by the hour, but last night when I was preparing this, we were over 375,000 cases across the world with over 16,000 deaths reported and 101,000 recovered. But if I can get a link click there, we'll look at the latest numbers. Dashboard's all the way down on the page now. Okay, so we're approaching overnight. As you can see, we're now at 398,000. So that's almost a 24,000 case jump worldwide in one night, with 17,454 deaths reported. U.S. is now number 3. We have about 46,805 cases reported in the United States. That's again a significant jump overnight. If I can get a link click on the U.S. numbers on the left-hand side column. There we go. And that shows you 593 deaths reported in the United States. Most of the activity that we're seeing is in New York State. They have thousands upon thousands, I believe, over 20,000 cases reported with 125 deaths. So that has become the epicenter of the outbreak in the United States at this point. Yesterday, when we were talking, there were 3 states that had issued stay-at-home orders, but as we were progressing through the evening, I think there are close to 20 states now that have issued a variety of stay-at-home orders. So it's happening across the U.S., and people are looking at this scientific data and making those decisions based on that. And I'll delve deeper into the details, but let's get to the next slide. Okay. So U.S. situational awareness, of course, last night when I was preparing, we were at 43,000. Now we're over 48,000, over 500 deaths. And the issue is, getting widespread across the U.S. But again, the main 3 states that are bearing the burden at this point are New York, California, and Washington State. But other states are starting to see a lot of activity with COVID-19. Public health here, and I can give you a Texas update. I mean, last night there were over 350 cases with 8 deaths reported. I'm sure that number has been updated today. Last night we were at 57 cases, but I can tell you this morning we've added 14 more confirmed cases with a total of 71, which includes 1 death and now 3 recovered with 67 active cases. And all of that information is updated and posted on our website.
Just a second, how many active cases do you say now? 70?
67 active, so that's 71 total. 1 death, 3 recovered. So that leaves 67 active cases in our community. And just so that you know, every day we get lots of reports from a variety of labs, including our own lab, but also private labs, and they come at all hours. So at any given time, there are always some pending reports. So that's just a preview that there's more to come. It's not, it's a snapshot in time. So 71 that we're confirming now, but there will be more confirmed today because we're working through that process.
How many pending reports? Because you sent out a note, 35 total. Some of those were pending.
Yes, sir. Last night we had 21 pending as our epi teams went home. I'm sure they received more reports overnight because they're electronically sent into our fax system, and there's an electronic reporting database as well. So we will summarize all of that today and then, of course, update it on our website. But again, the pending situation, it's a given that every day we're going to have some pending because you don't get to talk to everybody every day. We try our best to reach them, but if they're not available by phone, we give people some time to, be able to listen to their voicemail, give us a call, and then we try again. Most of that work is routine epidemiology work. You go through a case interview, understand, who they have been in contact with. Are they seriously ill? Are they mildly ill? Give them all the information that we normally give to the public as well. Okay, so I know there were a lot of questions about our hotline, and I'm happy to announce that we have a partnership with now UNT Health Science Center, and our hotline is working 24/7. This is just a chart of the call volume that we've seen over the last few days. If you look in the details, there are some days missing when we had weekends and there was no coverage because public health just didn't have the capacity to handle it. Now it's 24/7, 7 days a week, and some of the numbers at the peak were 1,400 calls throughout the day. And now it ebbs and flows as some things happen. I'm sure with the order placed today, we're going to see an increase in call volume, people asking questions. It's natural, but we have capacity at this point with our partnership to be able to answer most of these calls. And there are other conversations in play to further expand capacity, and we'll continue to work on that.
And so, Vinny, because quite honestly, I think all of us are feeling that the days are running together. We went live 24/7. Was that Friday?
I believe it was on 19th of March. Was that a Thursday or Friday? I can't remember.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So that was literally the day after that huge peak, and it just took a while to get the technology figured out on how to make it seamless, where they still call the hotline number, but it rolls over to other entities that are not within the county. So we've been able to figure that out, and it's working pretty smoothly.
Yeah, and I have not, and I don't think my staff has heard any complaints about it, so great job.
Thank you. All right. So I know there have been a variety of actions that our county has taken, with the latest one being, taken this morning, a very strict measure, if you will, in trying to ask people to really stay at home and do their part, because again, no one entity and no one person can do this alone. We're in this together as a community, and we all need to be doing our part by participating in all the preventive actions, the mitigation actions that are being recommended. And guidance, again, will change rapidly. Our judge has said that many times. I mean, it changes by the minute sometimes as things progress. And I will try to explain the scientific basis. And again, the balancing act is very hard, and I don't envy y'all's position of having to make those decisions. But here's the science behind it, and I know we've had conversations on why we are doing this. If you look at the national data, and of course overnight this updated again, we are in an exponentially high peak curve, if you will. Things that we're trying to avoid here locally. At the national level, these things are, quite exponential. Thousands of cases. I mean, if you look at the bar charts, on some given days, there are 8,000, 9,000 cases being added per day. That's a lot for any healthcare system to take. So this is the reason we need to bend that curve so it's manageable, because otherwise health outcomes become poor. You're starting to see some deaths. And if we had healthcare available for all of these people at any given time, hopefully we could have avoided some of those. But that's the burden that becomes very heavy on healthcare, on how to work that into their system.
Vinny,
Yes, sir.
before you switch that, who is that up there right now?
That's U.S. data, yes, sir. United
So
States data.
that's U.S. data, that's not Texas and or Tarrant County?
No, sir. This is the national level data, and again, if you look at the current graph, that's even higher, but this is, overnight we added another 8,000, 9,000 cases in the U.S., so you can add more of that into this.
So and I know you got a few other things you're doing right now than just doing PowerPoint presentations.
Yes.
But instead of putting Tarrant County Public Health at the top,
yes,
and no other verbiage as to what that represents,
yes, sir.
Would you please go ahead and list it down there, say this is the United States data, and
Yes,
not
sir.
somebody look at that and
I
say,
know, I will. Thank you. Okay, so here's the situation in Tarrant County, and people might say, well, that's not a whole lot, 10 here, 13 there. Why are we taking all these strict measures? I mean, and this is, again, doesn't include the 14 that we confirmed this morning. But the whole point is that we need to get started early and stay there, till we can, get this situation to blow over. That's the whole concept, and I'll explain how we learned that. Many epidemics and pandemics have, faced humanity over several years. One of the biggest ones was the 1917-18 flu. That killed a lot of people worldwide because, back in the day, we didn't have good medical treatment, we didn't have vaccine, and we didn't have antivirals. Well, in this particular pandemic, we have good health care, but we don't have a vaccine and we don't have antivirals, so some of the tools that we rely on are not there. So, tale of the two cities, Philadelphia and the Blue had a public parade, even though they knew their city was about to have flu situations. They figured, hey, the parade's on, we're going to be okay. And their city and county officials hesitated from taking strict action because it was a big parade, it was a big event, they didn't want to cancel it. And as a result, after that, they saw hundreds and thousands of cases occur in Philadelphia, death rate spiking to 250 per 100,000. And again, this is historical. That's not what we're expecting to see today. And then they were really overwhelmed with what they saw with the flu. St. Louis, on the other hand, learned from what happened in Philadelphia, and as soon as they saw their first couple of cases occur, they're like, oh, we're going to cancel all public events, we're going to really tighten up on social distancing measures, because that's all they had back in the day. And as you can see in the red, St. Louis survived at almost a 1/5 damage to their community from a case standpoint and a death standpoint. And the idea is, well, yeah, they bent the curve. So what are the numbers? Some of the historical data showing Philadelphia had 14,000 deaths. St. Louis, even though the situation lasted longer, went by with only 3,000 deaths. So their healthcare system at that time was able to handle that. And we've seen this repeated over and over in many other pandemic type situations, that if you are able to bend the curve by community mitigation strategies early, you are able to save your community from a lot of damage. So, we look at other things. We just don't rely on case data. We look at hospital, COVID-like illness, similar to what we see with influenza-like illness. So those data are starting to come in, and we're seeing an increase happening with COVID-like illness visits into our ER system. That means, obviously disease activity is picking up in our community. So this is the right time for y'all to be taking these steps. Very scientific approach, balanced with the community needs, but it is very, very timely and very scientific for us to be doing this. And again, why we keep coming back to social distancing, because there's no vaccine and there's no cure treatment per day for now for this virus. But if we can buy time by bending the curve, maybe some of those will come into play eventually and help us really put a stop to this virus. And it's been proven many, many times that it works. So what does this all really mean for the general public? And we all are now acknowledging and understanding that the pandemic is here, and we're going to prepare for an increase in cases. But all of these mitigation strategies are going to help us lower the burden in our community of this disease, help our healthcare systems to really handle that situation, and not be overwhelmed, because we want good outcomes for people who are ill, that they should get the best healthcare that we can give them, and hopefully we have good health outcomes for those folks recovering. And social distancing really only works if everyone does it, and that's the basis behind these orders that you're seeing for our community. All right, I think I'm stuck. If I can get to the next slide. Okay, the takeaway message again, we talked about this last time, it's spread the facts, not fear of COVID-19, because a lot of discussion that we see on social media, some of the community comments that you're also facing and seeing are based on fear and misinformation, because they've relied on social media without checking with credible resources, and they believe that it's the truth. A lot of times it's not. Learn from the experts and take that action of staying home and really spending time with your family, because we want you to use this time to reconnect with family. And if you feel isolated from friends and others, this is the time to leverage technology and get on Skype, get on FaceTime. I know that for children we say cut down screen time, but I'm saying stay connected with your schoolmates. Use FaceTime and talk to them. Don't feel isolated, but isolate at home and stay home and be connected. So our community is resilient, and we're volunteers at heart, and we will work through this together. And that's the key message. We're going to work through this together as a community, and y'all stay home. That's the message. All right, any other questions on COVID-19?
Yes. Vinny, if you could address a couple things that came up during the public comment period. There was one statement or caller that mentioned testing. If you can just, and I know that obviously that's something that changes very quickly, but so just talk about testing as of right now.
So testing capacity is improving. We're starting to see a lot of results come back from private labs, and these are either large commercial laboratories or even hospital system labs. So it's improving. I don't know that it's enough right now for everybody to get a test, but I highly want to discourage the public to think that everyone needs a test. We don't. Let's leave those testing capabilities for people who really need it. And there's a lot that goes on into it, people that are mildly ill, yes, everybody wants to know, do I have COVID-19? And we acknowledge that. We just don't have the current resources as a community to make sure everybody gets that test. We're getting there. But there's also this balance to draw that test up. Somebody, a healthcare professional, has to wear PPE, and that PPE is also in short supply. So if we can conserve that and use it for critical care people that are seriously ill, that would be the best use of that limited resource. But again, I'll leave it to our medical professionals to make that judgment. That's very hard for us to tell somebody, don't take a test. But also, the understanding is just getting the diagnosis really only gives you comfort that you know what you have. The treatment course really doesn't change. If you're mildly ill, your physician is going to tell you to go home, get rest, get a lot of fluids, and stay away from family, stay locked in a room pretty much. But if you're severely ill, we're all going to encourage you to go get to the hospital, get looked at, and possibly get admitted so you can get the best health care that we can provide.
Sure. Well, and that leads to the second point. Where you have
I've
more on
got
testing.
a comment on testing,
Okay.
if I may.
Sure.
Vinny and Judge, testing, I think, is something that we have not done a very good job of making available and accessible to our community. I know the orthodoxy is to go to your primary care physician and have them to draw a specimen and submit it to a private lab. But I can attest for myself that my primary care physician does not have the ability to draw a specimen and submit it to a private lab. That leaves a lot of people like me without a testing option. And asking them to go to one of the hospital websites and be pre-screened is to put them through a very, very narrow pipe that leads to very few testing resources. Testing ought to be seen as an essential function of county government, and we ought to have some way of addressing it.
Commissioner, I would say I understand what you're saying, and that's one of the big things that we hear. Again, one, going to a website and then having to fill out a survey. There's two things that we have on our website right now. One is Baylor Scott and White's screening process, which is an app where you fill out questions, you answer questions, submit it, and then it then begins the process of taking you up the line, but you don't have to leave your home. THR has a nurse hotline for those who may not be computer savvy and feel comfortable with the survey, where you call in a nurse, talk with a nurse, they then begin that process of moving you through the questions and answers, again, without you having to leave your home, to determine whether under the qualifications set forth, well, really, it's much lesser than that, I would say, because if you're going to public health, CDC has set up some very specific guidelines that Vinny and his group have to follow as public health officials. And even at that now, we're in the process of completing an MOU and asking MedStar to help us actually do the swabs. Up until, and maybe continuing today, we had one or two people that could go out and do the swabs, but again, we're not asking people to come in. Now, everybody's heard about these drive-by or drive-through testing facilities. Usually what happens is somebody has gone through one of those two other avenues or have gone to their doctors and they have said they've written an order for a test to be done. And those are the people, and first priority goes to essential personnel or first responders. But those are why those places are set up, so that they will not go into a provider's office and or an emergency room. But they still have to meet. You know, I was talking to someone yesterday, and when we say drive-through or drive-by, general public just thinks they can pull up and get tested. And that is really not the case, and that's why you've seen within Tarrant County, there are places where people are either driving by or they've got a specific appointment and they go to a specific area to get that done. And I will tell you that at one point, it was last week, and so I'm sure it's been much more than that by now, Baylor Scott and White had approximately 20,000 apps. The survey's done. Those were submitted. They went to the nurse level. I believe there was something like 2,000 that may have gone to the next level of a virtual visit, or ultimately there were, out of that 20,000, 200 tested, and I'm not sure how many out of that 200 tested were positives. But that was just the ones that filled out the surveys. I have no idea what THR and their nurse hotline is. But we're trying to find some way of setting it up, but they're gonna have to go through the screening because we do not have enough test kits. We do not have enough reagents at this point in time everybody wants a test. All 2 million in Tarrant County want a test. But the other part of that is if we test them too soon without them being asymptomatic, then in all likelihood, we're not gonna know whether they were positive.
Without them being symptomatic.
Correct. So that's the problem we face. People are very upset that they can't just drive by and get tested and know in 30 minutes whether they're positive.
And I know, Your Honor, we've had conversations about national data showing that about 93% are testing negative. So as you can see, with the thousands of cases that have tested positive, how many could have already, been used up in verifying these? So we really need to balance that out. If we have a limited resource and we're getting a 93% negative rate, that means we need to figure out a way to test only those that we really, really think are positives.
And I've asked everybody that we've talked with on a regular basis to put on their website both the THR as well as the Baylor Scott and White. I still realize we're not reaching a lot of people, so I just have to ask everyone, whether it be Facebook, whatever your social media platform is, and it may just be, hopefully it's not going to be just a regular meetings you go to, because you ain't supposed to be going to regular meetings anymore. But try to get that word out.
My point is that even in your example of 20,000 persons being screened and 200 persons being tested, that's 1% of the people screened. That's allocation of a scarce resource by a private organization. That ought to be a government function.
Well, the government, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Vinny, the government, I believe, is providing even those private folks with the swabs. Maybe not with the big labs, because they've now set up their own testing procedures that they go through.
I am not sure. I believe a lot of the private labs procure their own swabs. I don't know that the government resource went to them. There's lots of things that are scarce. I know it's beyond the scope of this conversation today, but the swabs are scarce, testing reagents are scarce, so a lot of issues in that supply chain, and it is a function of a global pandemic, some large-scale outbreaks happening before we got there and the world's supply getting consumed. So it's not an excuse, but it's really what's happened. The world is facing this, and everybody needs it. So that's where the issues are.
Commissioner Allen, I believe you had another point.
I did. Two other things. One is another person who called in had concerns about isolation measures that are taken, which I know that we've been addressing that for some time. But can you speak to that? Obviously, I know you can't provide specific details about who's where or anything like that, but just the measures that we're taking to isolate those who...
So we have two types of strategies. One are individual containment strategies that go around a confirmed case. So typically it starts with an interviewing of somebody who's tested positive for the disease, and we work through their close circles, close contacts, family members, co-workers, anybody that they've spent time socially with a significant amount of time, where they've been, their travel history, all those type of things. And from those we determine who's their close contacts. And then we interview those folks and see if they're experiencing any symptoms, verify that they had this close contact with the individual, how long, what setting, all those type of things. And then we give them instructions on staying home and staying isolated and what to watch for. We talk to them every day for 14 days from last known exposure. So it's a very labor-intensive work to do. And that's containment. And if any of those folks turn symptomatic, we ask them for testing, whether it's at their healthcare provider's office or in some cases, either we go collect them or now we're going to work with a partner entity to go collect them. That's how we do the containment piece. But as numbers start to grow, as you can imagine, it's going to be harder and harder to contain every single case and every single contact. And that's where these early start on mitigation strategies become very important, because that's a large-scale blanket of trying to minimize the number of cases occurring, and the contact work that needs to occur. So everybody in the community participates. So we're hopefully still be able to manage the containment that's needed around each individual case, because at some point the numbers become too large. I mean, I don't think New York is able to do contact tracing on 8,000 cases getting added every night. It's just not going to happen.
Okay. That actually was my final question.
And I think you were moving to the contacts, and I think you were going to
yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about community.
Yes, sir.
And stuff.
Thank you for reminding me of that. So one of the data pieces that I forgot to mention, and it's important for everybody to understand, part of the decision making for this morning was that how many of our cases are now considered community spread. That means cases that are without any known source, that they didn't have any known travel, they were not a contact to a known case, and just happened to have COVID-19. So out of our 71 confirmed cases, I can tell you there are about 19-ish, about 27%. I have the percentage correct. And that's a significant number from a percentage standpoint. Now, does that really mean that we have everybody running around in the county with the COVID-19? No, that's not the case. But this means there are at least 19 chains of transmission that we don't have a good idea of where they came from. So that is a significant trigger for our community to be making these decisions that you all have made this morning. So again, a scientific basis for all that's been done, and I really appreciate your leadership on this, because we're making these decisions very methodically and in a timely fashion to really bend that epidemic curve for our community.
And I will say that we were aware of those numbers, our hospitals, and that was certainly part of what helped us make the decision to move to the next step.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Vinny, thank you very much. Thank all your staff and tell them
yes,
how much
sir, I
we
will.
appreciate all the hard
Yes,
work they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Mr. Manias.
Now for the long agenda item. By the way, I have to, and of course he'll be upset, but he's not here. I just want to announce something today. This is the first.
Oh, now you're fixing,
Commissioner Johnson now has a computer. Don't start the wave yet. And as I spoke,
JD, I didn't out you on this deal.
And so everyone is hoping that they receive the first email.
I think I should get it. I'm just saying.
And he told me this morning that don't wait around for it. But anyway, we are all now in the modern age.
Well, welcome to 2020, Commissioner Johnson.
I couldn't let that pass. Oh, I know it.
You're going to get a call on that later.
Yeah, I probably will too.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go to item number 3, which deals with leave options concerning the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll start this out, but then Ms. Glenn is going to do the bulk of this presentation. You might remember that Sunday night that the court passed an order, and as you were passing that, we tried to explain what the order might be, and we promised you that we would be coming back to you today to give you clarification on that and ask you maybe to pass a new order that would encompass the things that we talked about on Sunday night. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. Probably at the end of this presentation, we're going to ask you to do several things. First, we're probably going to ask you to rescind the court order that we passed Sunday so we don't have confusing court orders out there as it relates to this. We're going to talk to you about how we might want to approach the grouping of different leave types. And let me say before we get into that, and that's what Ms. Glenn is going to be talking about, really want to thank, we hit this thing first thing yesterday morning. Ms. Glenn and her team, the county auditor and her team, the district attorney's people were there, budget was there, of course our people were there too. And it's more complex than it might seem, simply because we're trying to automate all this into SAP. And so they all worked very diligently on this. In fact, I think the last document I got was this morning on it. So they put in some quality time on this. And then finally, we're going to talk about new employee orientation. And that'll be something that I will talk about after Ms. Glenn comes up here. So a couple of things. And Ms. Glenn, if you'll come forward. One thing about Ms. Glenn, she does practice social distancing.
So the document you're referencing, that was in our red folder, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So there might have been some confusion about leave as it relates to the federal required leave, which is the family-friendly Coronavirus Act. We just call it the Family First Leave. And basically that leave had several categories that if you went ahead and qualified for one of those, you had up to 2 weeks that you could take, and I believe I think that period ran all the way through December 31st. We also talked about if we decided, which we did today, where that we're going to do a work safe at home approach, that there were going to be people who are county employees who may have to basically not or have the opportunity to stay at home, but may not qualify for this family friendly or family first bucket. And I think that we might have, or at least the court made action, and probably because of lack of direction from staff, but it appeared that we were giving everybody 2 weeks plus these extra 2 weeks of family first. And I don't believe that was the intent of staff's recommendation. What our recommendation was that for those individuals who qualify for Families First, that over this next period, all the way through December 31st, they have the availability of taking up to 2 weeks if they meet certain criteria. Those that don't, those are the individuals who are going to be staying at home. They may not be working from home, but they're simply staying at home, that are county employees. The court said that we were going to make those individuals whole. And when we talked about that 2 weeks versus the family first 2 weeks, there might have been some confusion that we were granting everybody 2 weeks and then plus another 2 weeks for family first. And that was not our intention. So as we get closer to the motion part of this, we're going to ask you to do several different things on that motion. And with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Glenn if she will go ahead and begin the discussions. The court communication that you have here, is the most recent one.
Make me laugh.
Ms. Glenn, before you start,
yes, sir.
I want to reiterate on behalf of this court that our philosophy was towards our employees, first, do no harm.
Yes, sir. And we heard that loud and clear. I'd like to start today by thanking my staff. Those of us who get to stand before you, we are just the people who represent our departments. But my staff is in place today. I have 2 staff members here who really have done all of the work. I'm just here to tell you what we've worked on. I have staff back in the office. I call them frontline staff. They're processing today. We have 3 processing sessions that are ongoing. They are taking phone calls. I have everybody in place as of today. And so I do want to personally thank them and publicly thank them because they have done a phenomenal job. So with that said, Mr. Manius, I think was trying to imply that I'm long-winded. He said this was going to be the longest session. And if I were sensitive, I might be offended by that, but I'm not sensitive. So we'll move on. So we have before you today, as Mr. Mania said, some information. The court began discussions on Sunday evening, about the best way to ensure that the court's directive to us that no harm to be done to county employees. And so we think we have captured that for you and want to just sort of talk through what we have proposed. Mr. Mania has made mention of the groups that have been involved. And again, a special thanks to the audit team, to budget. The county judge's office was involved, the county administrator, IT, and the criminal district attorney's office. So everybody stepped up. And again, I'm simply here just reporting what we're proposing. So let's get into the way that we've organized this. I think the best way to sort of move through it is we've tried to organize all of our employees into groups and then have some specific discussion about about our proposal and how we pay these groups of employees. So first, under background, we try to designate or differentiate between essential, at least we make mention of essential and non-essential employees. And I'll remind the court that the county administrator, Mr. Manias, sends all appointing authorities and department heads information, and my days have run together, as all of ours have. But in the last week or so, we all received communication to look within our departments and to designate essential and non-essential staff. And so I've been tasked with that in my department, just like all other department heads have been tasked with. So no, when we talk about, or when I make reference to essential and non-essential, that is based upon how each respective department head has chosen to identify staff. I want to say that first off. So let's talk about our groups. So our group one, so these are individuals that have been deemed essential, again, by the appointing authority or department head. These are the individuals that this group, we want these individuals to report to work, meaning they will report to a county facility. These individuals do not have the public health emergency designation. And you may recall we discussed that a little bit on Sunday night. Those designations, by the way, for your reference, are outlined under Group 4, which of course we'll talk about Group 4. But just as in the way of an example, an individual with this designation might be someone who has been quarantined by a healthcare provider. And you can see that there are 6 designations. So back to Group 1, these are essential workers, employees who do not have that designation, and these are individuals who are able to work, who are ready to work. We are proposing that these individuals report to work, and the non-exempt employees of Group 1 would receive an additional entry, additional pay, because what we heard you say on Sunday night is that you wanted to recognize the additional work effort for this group. So what we're proposing for the non-exempt employees would be an additional $3 per hour for what we're calling hazardous pay. Now, $3 an hour is just a recommendation. We've looked around to see what we see in other places. Robin sent to me last night, I think, some information that she had gotten about drivers, Pepsi drivers. They were paying their folks an additional, I think it was $100 a week, something in that time or in that range. So $3 an hour would be equivalent to about an additional $120 per week, just in the way of reference.
Can I ask you, if we looked at our higher end rate for our lowest hourly group,
yes,
what would that be?
And Ms. Worthy, I've asked her to.
She's sitting back there.
And I'm going to
be a heck of a lot more than $3 an hour.
Non-exempt salaries range from about $11.50 an hour to $50 an hour.
The lowest?
The lowest actual pay, or the lowest of a range?
The lowest employee that would be considered non-exempt and the higher-end rate for that individual range. So I think we have a grade 15.
That's not our lowest.
Grade 11.
So
Tell me
for-
what grade 11s do.
I'm not even sure we have any grade 11. 12 is the lowest we have, and they're typically either runners, typically. Is that correct? Yes. Or clerks. And so the range of non-exempt employees, if you don't include CSCD, the lowest paid one is $14.22 of an active employee.
And that's the higher end for that level.
No, that's the lowest pay. I don't have that information.
The hiring rate for a grade 12 is $13.74 an hour.
Okay, so it's $13.74. And if I took maybe a third of that, that would be very close, somewhere between $4 and $5, I think. $4.58. Let me ask this question. I guess that's, so $4.58 would be, that's a third of the lowest there. What is the lowest rate for one of our jailers?
I'm sorry?
Lowest rate for a new jailer, higher-end rate.
Was it grade 51?
Yes, sir.
$20.10 an hour.
How much?
$20.10 an hour.
Okay. And if I divided that by a third, what grade was that?
A 51.
51A.
51. Is A the higher end rate? Is that where we hire them in at?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What about equipment operators too?
27s they started. Is that correct, a 27? And yes.
The hiring rate for a grade 27 is $16.93.
Okay, wait a minute, what did you just give me?
Equipment operator
That's for
too.
equipment operator, which is a grade 27. The hiring rate is $16.93.
The equipment operators are hired in at 20% above, and you may not have that rather than the 10%. 1847.
$18.47 is the hiring.
And our lowest mechanics in the garages.
The 29s? 28s.
Is that a 20%er also?
Yes, she's calculating.
What was that number?
She's calculating.
2029.
That's a grade 28? Okay, that's not correct, because the hiring rate here is $18.60.
And that's 10% above minimum.
Okay.
They
I'm
get
sorry.
20.
I got you.
Sorry, 2.5.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so with those that we've looked at, we have 458, and then we go to 670, 616, and 676. And so I'm gonna probably tell you I would go to $6 an hour versus $3 an hour. That's just,
And that's by taking all those and dividing by a third. Is that what you did?
yeah, I took every one of them, I divided by third, and where I came up with a third, I don't have any idea. That's just the first number that came up in my head.
Our average non-exempt rate is about $25.43 of our non-exempt employees currently.
25.43?
Yes, sir, without CSCD included, because they have different salary structures. And what we had calculated, like at $5 an hour hazard pay, that would be about $200 extra, assuming 40-hour work week.
I would still like to look at 6, even though yours is 8, but yours is 8.47, because you were starting with the average of 25. I know what yours was. You're right. Yours was $3 an hour from that standpoint. If anybody can remember back when the last time court was closed or the county was closed, which should never which you sure could.
None of us remember that, Judge. That's been such a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember.
Thank you, Ms. Glenn. When we do that, what happens to law enforcement?
Well, that's been the challenge with payroll, and Renee may want to answer that, but I think we've handled it different ways over the years. I think in some cases, stop me if I'm incorrect, they were treated as if they had been requested to come in on a day off. Is that correct? Is that how we did it? I may not remember.
All I recall after all these years, is the last time everyone was given an additional amount of hours. So they were paid for what they worked, and then they were given an additional number of hours. And then those of us who stayed home, because we weren't essential, so to speak, we weren't in jail, we were also given those additional hours, but we had to take leave or account for our absence.
If someone works more than 40 hours a week for the county right now, they're hourly, what do they get paid?
Time and a half.
Time and a half, that's required by federal law.
Yeah, if they physically work in excess of 40, they're paid time and a half of their hourly rate.
Right, they can't include any holidays or other types of things, if they have to physically work, she said, that's the designation there.
Okay, so that gives us another number that we could calculate from, but, so that, again, so that would range anywhere from, it's time and a half, so it's, basically, if our lowest was 1374, that one would be very close to 20, and if the highest one was 50, we've got people who are hourly that are getting paid 50 an hour.
Yes, sir.
Specialized areas, medical examiner's office, maybe public health.
Lieutenants in the sheriff's department are deemed non-exempt by the FLSA, and therefore they are
Well,
paid.
if they were at 50, then they're gonna end up at 75. If we were to go time and a half, if we do that, then everybody, if we go with, I'm not saying a third of what theirs would be, I'm saying $6 an hour, regardless of whether you're.
Okay, you're talking about a flat hazard rate,
A hazard pay of
not
$6
a time
an
and a
hour.
half, okay.
Not time and a half.
And I do wanna say that we have discussed, and it would make it much more easy to accommodate the flat rate for everyone, calling it a hazard pay, is trying to calculate some additional amount on each person. Just because that becomes very complicated, and we can't also change our calculation for overtime, because that's still required by law. So we have a whole nother calculation where we'd be calculating some portion of their rate. If you give us a flat rate for employees, it's much easier for us to make that happen.
Okay, so we put a couple of examples out there. If the court would like to ask for other examples, or if y'all would like to make other comments, let's try to.
And as Ms. Tidwell said, the system is already set up to pay, we pay premium pays in some cases that are hourly amounts. For example, in the sheriff's department, those officers that are training other officers get what's called field training pay, and they get $1 an hour more. So the system is already set up to be able to do those calculations, so she's correct, that flat rate would be much easier for us to administer in this timeline.
So Renee, I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat the explanation that you gave, because here's what I thought I heard, is it's easier to do a flat rate per hour, but then I thought I heard you also say, but that wouldn't be hazard pay, because hazard pay is calculated differently.
No, I said we could do the flat rate and let's call it hazard pay.
Okay.
And not overtime.
Okay.
Because we would leave the overtime calculation separate.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha, okay.
Because, for example, some of these employees might not physically work 40 hours, but if they did, if they worked more than the 40 hours, they'd still be eligible for their time and a half, even in addition to the hazard pay.
And we would be required to do that obviously by law.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, which I'm certainly in favor of us making an adjustment. I haven't decided yet what I think is a reasonable number, but I am concerned about sustainability. So we're talking about right now an effective time period of March 22nd to April 7th?
Yes, it would be for a 2-week period.
2-week period, okay. So then even if we were to come back.
Wait a minute, let me pause.
Okay.
Because I just said 2 weeks from today, but I think
That's
we
in-
said it was gonna be 2 weeks from yesterday.
From Sunday.
Or maybe Sunday as it pertains to the jail.
That's correct.
Because even though we're rescinding that order, we're still making it, our actions effective based off of their
Yeah,
original order.
there was a
coming
tremendous
in.
amount of concern about, if we did something today, what about yesterday? So
Yeah.
we said, look, we're gonna ask that we do this Sunday at
Okay.
the time that the court made the initial decision.
Which was about the time the 10 o'clock shift came on board,
So,
unfortunately. And
this,
not for them, but for the fact that we were still here.
so I'm just gonna talk this out, and I don't know that it's a complete thought yet, but, so obviously we would want for folks to be appropriately compensated, and anything is better than nothing, except for once we set this amount and it's for a 2-week period, then what happens after that? And I know that there's a lot that we can't say beyond, somewhat of a limited time frame. Just want to make sure that as we're making these changes, if people are then making decisions for their families based off of what that pay is, that we're leaving them enough wiggle room to potentially make less, or do you know what I'm saying? Like,
So may I try to answer that?
please.
So, the reason that we're doing this is because we're in a 2-week period now where that we very well may be sending a lot of people home.
Sure.
And there are some people who will simply have to be here working.
Right.
And so the discussion Sunday night was, if you have to come to your workplace to work, that's when the extra compensation would be given, not to those who are at home. So because of the orders that we currently have and the work from home, work safe, that's for a 2-week period. We ask that it end there, but if we see that it's going to be extended, we would ask that this pay process continue to be extended until we're all ordered back to work.
And then, of course, we can have the conversation about what's an appropriate hazard pay at that time.
Yes.
given-
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure I'm understanding the flow of things.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So, what I would like for us to do is make a decision on a particular thing and then move to the next. And if we have to come back because of a subsequent decision, that'd be all right. And I don't care that we don't have to necessarily take a vote right now, but I'd like for us to kind of reach some sort of a consensus as to where we are on the pay, and then we'll move into some of the other discussions.
I'm good with $6.
Okay, so right now we're good with 6. Commissioner Johnson? So you told everybody he had a computer and he just decided, okay, I'll show him.
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
I'm not gonna say that. If you can get back to us at a future point, we'll go on and we'll listen to it at the end. Next discussion point.
Thank you. So next discussion point would be Group 2. So Group 2 would be our non-essential employees who work from an off-site workplace. Again, non-essential meaning they're not required to be here on county premises, but their work is important enough that they're going to do it from on an alternative, easy for me to say, workplace. And the court will recall that you all approved telecommuting for county employees. I guess it's been a couple of weeks. I've lost track of time. And so HR and the county administrator's office has been receiving applications. I believe they're in the process and have approved applications. So we have individuals who are in place and some who are telecommunicating as we are speaking. So what we're proposing for this group of individuals, they're just working from a different site. And so those individuals will receive their pay and will continue in these telecommuting arrangements until they are terminated by the appointing authority or his or her designee.
The arrangement is terminated.
Yes.
They'll continue to
Thank
get
you.
paid their regular
Yes,
pay.
the arrangement is terminated. Correct.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Manius.
And so just as a reminder that
Yes.
before, like with our original adoption of the telecommuting policy, it was that it would come through the county administrator's office and then to the court. But it's stopping at the county administrator's office, and I'm assuming we're handling that on a rolling basis, right? And
That's
we'll
correct.
continue
You all
to
had given, we had asked that you all give me the authority to make the decisions on the non-exempt, and that's what we're doing.
So again, as I hear it, I want to be sure I understand. So if you're working from home, you're not essential, you're going to get the same pay you would get otherwise, no hazard pay.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Ready to move to group 3? So group 3 are non-essential employees who are not required to work and who are unable to work from an off-site workplace, and again, do not have one of the designations that that's referenced in group 4. So again, just to repeat, these are non-essential employees who are not required to be at work or who are unable to work. So what we're proposing for this group is that they would record their time under absence type, pandemic time off, PDTO. And those individuals would be paid through April 7th or longer if the court chooses to extend that into the future. It's important to note with this group of employees, these employees are expected to remain at home. I'll repeat, remain at home. And if called, they will report to work and or respond to requests immediately. That's group 3.
I'm good.
They're going to get paid their regular pay.
Yes, sir.
Because they're home for whatever reason they're home for.
They're home because we sent them home.
Correct. We sent them home, or they were sick, or whatever, but we sent them home, and so. But if we send them home and we need them back for answering volunteer hotlines or anything else like that,
they are to report.
Then we're going to bring them in. They're going to report. But throughout that period, they are going to be paid their normal pay.
Yes, sir.
And they're on call.
They'll need to stay in their home.
That's group 3. Are we ready to move to group 4?
Go for it.
So group 4 are employees who are unable to work because they have, as designated by the Family First Act, what is called a public health emergency designation. And so those designations are listed for you there under group 4. I won't read them all. There's 6 of them, A through F. I gave you an example earlier. A designation, this is B, would be a situation where a healthcare provider would have required an employee to self-quarantine. So that's just an example. You can see that there's 6 of them. This group, we've had a lot of discussion. As Mr. Manius indicated, the Family First Act requires that Tarrant County pay this group of employees. The Act specifically says 80 hours of leave, and I believe they call it emergency sick leave. And so what you have proposed in your court communique would have those individuals record their absences under absence type FFCT, Family First Coronavirus Time, for the 2-week period. Temporary employees in this group would record their time using a prorated calculation based upon their average work hours. And so the example that we have here is that if you have a temporary employee who works 20 hours per week, then you would enter the department, whoever enters the employee's time would enter 20 hours of FFCT for the 2 weeks of eligibility. And again, we have identified those specific designations. Now, do we want to get into discussion about So the criminal district attorney's office, unless they have another opinion today, I don't believe that they do, has some concerns or voiced some concerns about when the clock starts on this specific bucket, because that's the term we're all familiar with, bucket of leave. Now, I'm not sure if the recension, if that changes anything. I need some help here.
Well, the communique says that that's effective April 8th. Is that the same thing as what you're saying?
I don't know that you've seen this communique.
What we're trying to do is, if we're mandated to make this payment, okay? And so if employees fall within this criteria, then we ask that their pay is part of what they can utilize in this 80 hours. Now, Ms. Hunt.
I don't see what difference it makes. We're paying all employees anyway.
That's true.
Why do we have to separate these out?
The reason that we were doing that was because if we treated them where that they didn't have to utilize this time, even though they qualified for this time during this 2-week period, that 2 weeks still carries forward. And that's what we're trying to address. And Ms. Hunt, I believe it carries forward until December 31st. Is that?
Yes. Of 2020.
Of 2020. So I had not seen this revised communique. The employees that were sent home cannot be forced to categorize their time under the Family First Act, because they did not, that was not, I mean, there are steps that we can do to make that happen if that is what the court wants to do. But as it currently stands, the Family First Act requires an employee to come and say, I can't work because of one of these. The circumstance where we say we want to keep you safe and we sent you home does not require them to use that time. So there is a concern that some people will end up with more than just 80 hours of paid time off. But unless we bring back anyone that we sent home and explain to them that if you choose to work from home, if you are sent home and you're not equipped to work from home because you don't have the equipment, but you're on call and you're receiving pay, if we want them to use the Family First time, we have to communicate that they have a choice. We can't make them, because what's going to happen is they would use all of their time for 2 weeks, and then in, say, October, when their child gets COVID-19, or when they fall under one of these protected categories, they will have used up all of their time. So what we did on Sunday cannot force them to use that time for these 2 weeks that we're trying to keep them safe, because that would use up all of their time. It's their choice. If people know, if the employees know that they have to use that time, they may choose to come back to work and fill up our buildings again, for fear that in the months to come, they're going to really need that time.
But has the federal government said that they've got this for what period of time? Until
December. So it's use it or lose it, okay? But the previous communique said that they weren't going to start coding this as Family First time until April 8th. And that is acceptable. But just know that it is possible that if someone needs to take advantage of Family First and they've been on call for the last 2 weeks and have received pay, it is possible that they would receive more than 80 hours of pay. But that's the only way we can do it, unless we take some steps.
But it does specifically say, if they were to say wait till September, they're going to have to prove that somebody in the family has COVID-19.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. I mean, the risk of abuse I consider relatively low, because the requirements require isolation, medical advice. You can't just say, I'm worried. And so But I just wanted to be clear that that coding, if it's going to take place prior to April 8th, then we just need to discuss what we need to communicate to the employees, and you need to know that some of them may come back to work right now. And is that what you all intended? Or are we intending to clean out our buildings for the next 2 weeks to the best extent we can?
Okay, King's X, you can leave.
Okay.
Thank you, Leslie.
Tina, would you please step aside?
Yes.
We've got a public health director back there who is waiting on one item, and I think that's for the ratification. Can we take that item up right now and let him go back to what he needs to be doing?
I'll do that for you.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
I think they just noticed me sitting back here.
Well, I was afraid he was gonna doze off back there, and I wanted to get him back up and moving around.
Your Honor, he can leave. Well, I'll cover it for you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Vinny, again, thank you.
We're right in the middle of
Okay, that's fine.
Bye.
That's just all right.
We're not gonna let it get past.
Yes.
Go away.
Thank you again, Vinny. Thank all your people. Okay, come on back. I just saw Vinny out there and I thought, okay, why? And then I realized why when I looked down my agenda.
So I believe we were talking about Group 4. And as Ms. Hunt indicated, and what she's reiterated today, if the court is in agreement, then we would have employees record their, and again, we're talking about the group of employees who are entitled to those 80 hours under the Act. So these employees would record their absences under the pay type pandemic time off, which is what we talked about for the previous group. So that means that they would be paid, okay? And then through April 7th. And then effective April 8th, employees would consider any additional time off that they might need as the sick leave, or the sick leave as described in the Act. And so what that means in the interim is that my office will need to make official notice. Again, this bill was signed into law, I believe, one day last week, the Act, the Family First Act. And so we obviously have not had an opportunity to do that. We would make the official notice, make the provisions of the Act known, and then have employees, as Ms. Hunt indicated, request time off under the Act, if that makes sense. And somebody correct me if I've said something incorrect.
Can we state in here
yes,
that you can't draw PHED time and other paid time off at the same time?
Can we? Or do, go ahead.
Well,
I think that's our intention.
I would say too, you can't claim this, you're not gonna get double time.
Correct. Oh, absolutely not.
So, okay, so you're
Absolutely
clear
not.
that that's.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So trying to boil it down in 50 words or less. So the question before the court is this. If a person qualifies for this pay, or this leave, do you want that to start after I guess it's April 8th? Or do you want us to have them consume that, if they qualify, over the next 2 weeks? That's the question. Because if they don't, if you say they start on April 8th, well then between these next 2 weeks, we will simply treat them as other employees.
I started right now.
And again, I understand what the DA is saying, and I'm not suggesting that.
She didn't like what I said.
I'm not suggesting that I'm an attorney, but for example, I do have an employee who requested before any of this came up that they had a child that they didn't have childcare for because the school was closed. They're not an essential employee. They're not someone who can work from home. So I actually have a person that would fit in the very category that we're talking about. The schools now are going to be closed for the end of the school year. So the 80 hours that person would be entitled, because I sent them home,
double dipping,
No, it's not.
but again, it's your discretion. I'm just pointing out, I actually have an employee that this will impact. And if you make my employee wait until, if you make her start charging time now under this act, well, then she's going to, in theory, run out possibly before her child is able to go back to school in fall.
Or a more crucial case is someone who might develop symptoms of the coronavirus
After April 8th.
after April 8th and need these protections.
That's right. And so,
Let me ask one question.
yes,
Let's take Renee's example. If we make them wait till April 8th and they're cured by that point in time, then we require her to basically just use one time from one of the many buckets. I'm not gonna say what kind of bucket, but from one of the buckets, and then she won't be eligible to take the time from our, whatever we call it, bucket.
okay, the situation that was just described could be treated differently because that was an individualized request. But the employees that have been sent home, as I've heard that term used here today, cannot be penalized for falling into one of those categories. They can't be, because all of these other people that do not fall into one of those categories are being treated differently. They are not having to use their 80-hour bucket. Therefore, the people that are protected under this law, if you make it go into effect today and make them use up those 80 hours, they are being detrimentally impacted, and that violates that. We can't do that.
I don't think I'm proposing. I don't think we're proposing.
So that's
I thought you just said do it today.
So what you're saying, and that's the first time I heard about the penalty issue. I didn't realize that. Then, if knowing that that's the law, then we don't have a choice here. We simply have to allow for this first 2 weeks that they not use their family-friendly money.
Right.
That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah.
That's what I guess I'm confused there, because if we send somebody home, we're paying them, we're not requiring them to take time off, then
That's correct, but what has been discussed here today is that if those people would qualify under the Families First Act, that they would be required to be using up that bucket of time, and that's what I'm telling you can't do.
I'm not sure. Okay, I think I agree with that. I didn't think that's what we were doing, but maybe, obviously, we must have been.
Well,
Renee's employee, for the last whatever period of time that she was off, beginning, if it was yesterday or whatever, I would say she could code that to this, whatever new bucket it is.
That would be an exception that could be Families First, because she requested it.
Well, and I'm saying we would say, sure, go ahead.
Okay.
The only thing that we were trying to do was to try to get a clarification from the court because we were moving really pretty fast Sunday night. And do we want them to consume their Family First bucket, or do we want to include them with all the other employees? And then the result of that would be, once all the other employees came back to work, they would still have the 80 hours in the Family First bucket. That was the clarification we were seeking.
Teresa would tell us that bucket belongs to the employee and they can use it whenever they need to use it. And we can't direct them when to use it.
Right?
Am I Teresa?
You.
It's their, you're right, it's their bucket, and we pay for it.
Okay, so question.
What is your name?
So is the law currently in effect? Because on the communique that we received on Sunday, it said the provision of these laws are anticipated to go into effect on or before April 2nd. So are they in effect now?
It's my understanding, just what you read, that the law is to be effectuated on or before April 2nd. So we can do it earlier than April 2nd, but it has to be done by April 2nd. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did I say that wrong?
No, you said it absolutely right, just to provide a little more clarification.
Okay.
So long as no one on April 2nd needs paid leave under the act
And isn't getting
and isn't getting it,
Okay.
then we have complied with the law.
Okay, very good. Okay. And so, because I heard an April 7th date and April 8th date,
Yes, ma'am.
it would go into effect the moment that we voted into effect.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
would it necessarily be used? And so, okay, you're shaking your head, GK. What am I missing?
No, it wouldn't be used until after, I believe, our date on this other is April 8th.
So if I could recap it, it might
Yeah,
be a
that'd be
little bit helpful. Okay, so let's start again. We're talking about Group 4.
Mm-hmm.
So Group 4 are employees who are not able to work because they have one of these designations. And so I think where we've landed, I believe, is that this group of employees, they have one of these designations because we've not been able to, in most cases, have a conversation with them, identify one of these designations because they were told to go home, okay? So what we're gonna do with this group, what we are proposing is that their absence will be coded as PDTO, which in our little lingo means pandemic time off, that is paid time. And that will run for them through April 7th. And then effective April 8th, the day after, then their leave then could be coded as this paid sick leave that the act, if they need time off, that they're given in the act.
And they have to qualify, right?
Yes, sir, one of these designations. What we will do in the interim, and I mean HR, is that we will try to disseminate information about these designations so that then employees have an opportunity to respond that, yes, one of these designations applies to me and I'm entitled to this leave. And I think that's the piece of it that we haven't, just because of timing, we haven't had an opportunity to do.
Can I ask? Everything is centered around, everybody keeps saying April 7th.
Yes, sir.
And I know our deal goes through April 7th because, one, we cannot extend anything. I can't make an order.
Yes, sir.
But I don't, I hope I'm wrong right now. I hope that on April 7th, everything is back to normal and we're ready to go forward.
Yes, sir.
I don't think that's gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen.
And so on April 7th or before, if we have to call an emergency meeting, we may very well extend it past then. So I don't want everybody to think that on April 7th, everything we're doing stops and they're back to normal, or, because they're not gonna be happy about that, one. And I just don't see it happening. So what I think you need to be saying, or at least we need to be thinking, is that for as long as we're in the middle of all this, whatever we do is gonna apply. It's gonna apply. It may be May 1st, it may be maybe April 7th, it may be April 14th. Don't know. But everybody seems to be targeted on this, and that's the effective date of this order, and that's when it ends. But I really think we're going to extend it.
So, Judge, I need to ask a question though. So the reason I would be focused on that date is because when we were here Sunday, we calculated that 80 hours is what we were offering to employees because basically it was 2 work weeks. So it was the five days at 8 hours a day. And so when we load into the employees' payroll system, we're going to have to give them those potential up to 80 hours. Obviously, if people work and don't use the whole 80, there could be a residue there, but then that's where the date would come into effect. The person that went out on leave yesterday, because I sent them home yesterday, and they're out on leave for the full 80 hours, when they get to April 7th, they will have no leave left other than their own regular accruals, and that would be why I think we would be starting family medical. You're correct. If we don't all come back to work on April the 8th, just pick that date, then the question would be, is the court going to grant any additional leave for those employees that still fall into the category that are receiving the 80 hours? And that's, of course, your discretion at that point in time, but if we don't put a date on it, we don't know when to come back.
Well, I think we're saying 80 hours from whatever date that they begin. I think when we get to April 7th, first off, we'll have had 2 weeks to figure out what we messed up today and maybe begin to correct it.
We're just all doing our best.
We are. And we've got to take it one day at a time. And the one thing that I've said from the beginning of this, and I'll say it all the way till the end, we got to be flexible. We're going to mess something up, and we're going to have to go back after the fact and try to correct it.
And the
But what we're not gonna mess up is paying people simultaneously from our bucket and from this federal Families First.
No, in no, yeah, you're right. In no
We're not gonna
instance,
double pay anybody.
in no instance, the only people are going to get more than what their regular daily, hourly, whatever pay is are the ones that are on hazard duty.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
That's it.
But I think the distinction with the dates is important because we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting on the 31st, so it would require an emergency meeting because our next court meeting wouldn't be until April 7th.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
And the reason we put the hard stop in there is because, departments may not realize that there is a hard stop out there. And we will be arguing, if you wanted it to stop on the 7th, you should have said the 7th. And you just have to nail that down. That doesn't mean you can't change it, but some departments will consider that a total open-ended issue, and we'll have to go back and clean it up. We never intended it to. We had to have a hard stop.
We started on the 22nd, late that night, so the 80 hours would probably run for folks through April the 3rd or 4th, depending upon when they were working. But again, folks, this is fluid.
Absolutely.
We got to be flexible, and y'all are gonna figure out 100 other questions to ask us by
Not me.
by April 7th. And if you ask us too many, then we may have to bring everybody back. Of course, we can bring everybody back in because y'all can't be traveling. We've just outlawed y'all traveling today. You gotta stay at home. Okay? So what we're basically saying is we're gonna agree.
I think we all know what you're gonna say.
Go.
How about 5?
You need a motion?
Not yet.
Okay. So Group 5 is our last group. Group 5 are employees who are not working because they are qualified for family and medical leave under the expanded definition of the Families First Act. And I have to say something publicly to Russell, our census czar. He was right about this. So he told me he was going to eat crow. I guess I'll have to eat crow. There was a lot of internal discussion back and forth about whether this expanded family medical leave provision applies to Tarrant County. Some of the information that we received from SHRM, there were a lot of inconsistencies. I think where we've all landed is that Tarrant County is covered, Russell, under the expanded definition of family medical leave. And so what we're proposing for this group is that these individuals will record their time, and again, I'm back to PDTO through April 7th, the dates and the absence types that we're familiar with. Again, the rationale is pretty much the same. This bill was signed into law last week, and so we have not had an opportunity to notify employees. We will do that in the next couple of days. In the interim, we want these individuals to be paid, and then when we have the opportunity to make appropriate notice, then any time that is covered by the expansion then will be counted against their FML balances. So this law does not extend the 12 weeks. The 12 weeks are the same for everybody, just as it's always been since the early 90s. But what it does is it will allow individuals FML protection who are unable to work, or it says telework, in our world it's telecommute, due to a need for leave to care for a son or daughter under 18, if the school or place of care has been closed, or the child care provider of such son or daughter is unavailable due to a public health emergency. So we'll be communicating that. Again, in the interim, our recommendation is the PDTO absence type, which pays them until we can establish the appropriate notice, if that makes sense. That's group 5.
Oy vey.
Pardon?
Oy vey.
Yes, sir. I don't know what that means, but yes, sir.
So, balance buckets.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have more of them, or we just have a subset of them? Do you know what I'm
Okay.
saying? 'Cause
I don't, okay, somebody's
We're
gonna
gonna
have to help me with the leave type
We need to have
discussion.
them in their
For
little
each-
discrete.
okay.
So,
Okay, great.
That's
So,
the
and-
answer, the PTO.
yes, ma'am.
Right,
But because we don't wanna commingle,
right.
because the last piece of all of this is down the road at some point in time, we may be eligible either for a credit from the
Right.
IRS
Reimbursement.
or, again, seeking grant money through the federal government. And so we need to put these things where we can go back and pull out easily what we did and what we paid, for example, for related to various activity related to the virus.
Sure. And the reason why I asked that question is I know for right now we don't have an idea of the fiscal impact, but with subsequent discussions and decisions that we make, it would be helpful to know what the fiscal impact is, and I don't know if we do that based off of the buckets, if that makes sense. Okay.
I'd like to emphasize another thing, because I'm aware of at least one department who sent non-essential personnel home and told them that they would have to take that time off out of one of their leave buckets. That is not the policy of this court. We are paying employees for staying at home, and we're not charging them anything for that privilege. Not anything out of any of their leave buckets. We are paying.
And that's the case, right?
I'm sorry? Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, I'm saying yes. I think I'm hearing effective date of that, of what you just described, Commissioner Brooks.
Sunday.
As of Sunday, thank you. I was just hearing effective date. Go ahead, Robin.
I wanted to say that those bucket types, employees won't be able to see them right now. We have been working with payroll and IT, and those will be, once you all vote, IT will get working on that. So if your employee were to try to go in and put it in right now, it won't be there, but we'll get those in there and we'll make sure that they get charged correctly and that they get that hazard pay. So it'll get right in the wash eventually.
It's complicated, and employees are not gonna understand how to allocate between all these buckets. Y'all gonna have to do some training.
I would say it's extremely important, Helen, that you try as best you can to communicate to all elected officials and department heads as to how they account for costs associated. Give them blue forms, give them gold forms, give them whatever. Something that if they believe that it has to do with COVID-19, let's tell them to put it there, and then we can begin to sort through whether ultimately it actually is or not.
And I would like to just add one other thing. The philosophy that the auditor's office, and particularly payroll, is going to pursue is we're gonna pay people, and then we're gonna sort it out later.
Yes.
Because as you point out, it will be very, very complicated, it will be confusing, but we will always try to err on the side of making sure that 80% goes out the door. If it's 20% that can't for some reason, then we pay them as quickly as possible. But I just wanted that, I believe that's your philosophy, but that's mine at this point in time, so if I have to come back later though and say that we paid someone incorrectly or whatever, it'll be because we were trying to make sure that we got money in their shoes.
I think you are correct.
Okay. Is somebody ready to make a motion?
Yes.
Since you can't do it, then maybe let somebody up here do it.
You want recension of
So
stuff
let's do.
I'm sorry.
State the motion.
I'm sorry. staff is telling me I missed something. They're responsible for not letting me mess up.
I told you we were gonna mess up.
You have not messed up. There's just one group we haven't addressed, which is temporary employees. So under the paid sick leave part of the act, they are required to receive paid sick leave. What we haven't determined is what, if anything, we'll be paying them in the interim through the April 7th or later date. Project, temporary employees of any variety.
That includes part-time.
Correct. We have temporary hourly, temporary part-time, temporary project, temporary substitutes. So generally, substitutes work sporadically. Generally, part-time employees work between 16 and 28 hours per pay period. Who's next? Hourly, it varies. Some people will use them for a solid, say, 3-month block of time. Some will use them sporadically. Project employees are full-time employees, most likely.
So is there an hourly rate that, at which point we must offer benefits? Is that 20?
No temporary, except for project employee, is eligible for benefits.
Minus retirement.
No temporaries other than in projects receive benefits. Project employees receive everything but retirement.
Okay. So what are y'all recommending?
Well, first of all, I think that we need to pay our project employees because they're really full-time people except for the lack of some benefits. And that would be my recommendation. If you have recommendations for others.
Wait, so are we using those terms interchangeably, temporary employees and project employees?
Well, Commissioner, we have quite a little complex classification of temps, and so some have been mentioned. So we have what we call county temps. Those individuals work, okay, I'm trying to read my notes here. They cannot work more than 28 hours in a week, and they work for less than a year. If they work for up to a year, we take them off of payroll. So that group, they're called county temps. They work less than 28 hours. We have project temps. Ms. Ramnarine just discussed that group. That group, in effect, work a full-time schedule and receive all benefits with the exception of retirement. And then I think Mr. Manius or someone mentioned regular part-time temps. We have one in our office. She's fabulous. She works.
I'm sorry, but let me
Yes.
just, because I may be wrong, and
Yes.
and they're going to be quick to tell me, but I'm of the opinion that there's also a great deal of problem. You know, the economy is going to have to come back at some point in time.
Yes, sir.
Most of these folks depend upon that money.
Yes, sir.
If they can continue to work, if they're temporary projects, whatever, if they can continue to work, most of them are not going to be able to work from home. But if they can continue to work and come in, then I'm probably of the opinion that we ought to pay them. I'm not sure we pay them hazard pay.
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
Yeah, I knew it was. I can already see the
Yeah.
lights going off, and that may be where we have to have some discussion. But these people don't have benefits. They're not getting insurance. They are, except the projects. I mean, I just see you folks raising your head and telling me, oh, he's fixing to screw up. Am I? Where are y'all on those?
Yeah, some of these part-time people are more or less permanent employees. They just work part-time.
So, Angie,
and they ought to be paid.
I would
Right,
like
Tom?
Yeah, and I'm fine with other comments or questions. I would like, Tina, if you could continue with the list at some point, just to affirm my own understanding. So.
I apologize.
Yeah, it's all
You're right.
Excuse me, Angie. I think I was.
Regular part-time temps.
Yes, ma'am. So regular part-time temps, these are individuals who regularly are assigned to work between 16 and 28 hours per work week with no ending date. And I think to your point, Commissioner Brooks, some of these folks have been with us for a very long time. Sometimes it just works best, that schedule with their, work life, school. And so that is an additional category, Commissioner Allen. And I believe the last one is substitute, and these are individuals who work on an as-needed basis. So I believe I got those, got all of them.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So does HR have a recommendation?
I would suggest on the fly that we at least include pay for the part-time and the project employees. Those are, as we've said, a little bit more full-time and or permanent positions.
What about
Temporaries, I would suggest that we not include them.
Temporaries being the county temps?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Correct.
So they couldn't come to work, and we're not gonna pay them anything.
Correct.
I mean, if they come to work, we have to pay them.
What was that?
So not if they don't have a supervisor.
Okay.
So just to clarify, when we say we're gonna pay them, is that tied to, Judge, what you said about them working? We're gonna pay them if they work, or we're gonna pay them if they don't? I'm not clear about that.
You said work.
They're gonna have to work.
Okay,
Yeah.
just, I wanna make
Now, I
sure I'm
wanna
clear.
know, I want my legal eagles over here to tell me whether or not if we're bringing them into a building and we've paid everybody else the $6 extra an hour, can we differentiate between our full-time folks and these folks? Cause I just got a sense that somewhere down here, we're gonna wake up and realize what we did, and you're gonna tell us we can't do it.
Well, these are all hourly employees.
And that's why I'm saying, that's why I'm asking them, because we've just said that many of those are gonna have to come in because they're not gonna be able to work from home. And I wanna know if we can treat them differently than all the other full-time employees.
I think it would depend on what their job functions are, but if I just had to give you an answer without looking at any statutes, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, I would say it doesn't sound advisable.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I'm gonna go back to our grant employees for a minute, because we got those grants under specific payroll terms, and I'm not sure we can pay the grantees that $6 an hour. Don't everybody jump up at once. Get on up here. No, come on up here.
Judge, are you talking about individuals who are working and being paid through a grant? Is that what you're?
Correct.
Full-time employees under grants.
Yes, but they're paid under, they're grants. and
Not
if-
knowing exactly what all the grants would say, that you'd have to get with the grant auditors, but it would have to be under either operating subsidy is where it probably, we've discussed this just a little bit with the auditor's office, and most of them will not allow the additional pay.
So if that were the case, then the next question would be, is can the county pay that? And hopefully maybe that would be a Corona cost. But I'm just saying, begin thinking about this, because you're gonna have people working on grants, and they're gonna say, wait a minute, I really considered myself I know, and I know they're not, and I know we've stressed to them.
They're
that
county
not.
employees. They
But
consider
let's
themselves
think
a
about
county
it. Let's give some, what are they, county employees as far as being on our
They're on
pension?
yes, they're on our payroll, they receive all our benefits, they're county employees. They just have a different funding
And
source.
they're not necessarily civil service, because we have the right, depending on the funding of the grant, whether or not their employment continues. If we lose the grant
Then they
completely, the
lose.
funding goes away.
Then,
They're
in
not
my opinion,
guaranteed.
if they're eligible for pension,
They are.
they should be getting the hazard duty pay or whatever it is, and if we end up having to pay for it out of our pocket, we'll pay for it out of our pocket.
It would be operating subsidy.
But it could also, I would also qualify it as a hazard pay for,
And
at
that's
least
why, and that's
we'll
the
apply
reason for
it.
all of these different buckets of money, so that we can identify this when we put together all the
Good point.
cost.
Very
That's
good
the
point.
reason for it.
So just an estimate, how many employees do we have that are salaries are being funded?
Public health has the largest segment of it.
Well, can we just come back with that number?
We
our
can get
next
that number for you
discussion? Okay,
positively,
great,
yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
As a point of reference, community development, all of our employees in community development, except for the director, are grant employees. And they have been that way for a little over 40 years.
Yeah.
longer than she's been alive. No, it said 40.
Oh. Fine.
I wasn't
Okay,
talking about
so
your
we're
mental, I was
paying-
talking about your.
We're paying grant employees, we're paying project employees, we're paying part-time, what did you call those?
Well, we have, they're temporary employees, just different
Regular
categories
Temporary
of temps.
part-time employee. Is that it?
Well, I just, again, are we, just so that I'm clear, with regard to temporaries, we're saying that they have to work in order to be paid. Yes?
So,
Most of them are not going to be able to work. So I don't think they get paid.
well, but what if they're deemed as an essential worker, though?
That's a good question.
I think we're gonna spend more time talking about this.
Yes, sir.
I think right now I would err on the side of, if they're in here working, we're gonna pay them. We may very well pay them the $6. We'll look at that. There was a question earlier about, okay, people better not get used to the $6
Yes, sir.
extra, because it's going, when this thing's over with, it's going back down, so don't, I know most of us may spend to the level of what we got coming in. You better put that back.
That's why we wanted the hard stop.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
But if we've got any temporary employees who are essential employees, they shouldn't be temporary.
Will you say that one more time?
If we've got any temporary employees who are considered essential employees, they shouldn't be temporary employees. They ought to be full-time employees.
I would agree with that, Commissioner Brooks.
So let's try a few motions.
You want to try, are you expecting to take a few before we get to the one that we're going to finally pass? Whatever, go ahead.
Let's
Go
try
for it,
this.
GK.
Staff is recommending that the Commissioners Court do the following. This relates to the court communication. Let's do this. We ask that you rescind Court Order 132431, which was passed Sunday the 22nd.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
How do you vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So that was a yes and not yes. Motion passes unanimously. Now, wait a minute. There was a vote a few minutes ago that I'm sure you made, but we couldn't hear you. What was that vote on? Okay, we've got you so far. Okay, now go on, GK.
Okay, so the second motion we're asking, and this deals specifically with the document that we gave you in your red folder. We're requesting that the court approve this with the following exceptions. That under Group 1, rather than $3 per hour, it be $6 per hour. And in Group 4, that employees will not be asked to utilize their FFCRA funding the 2 weeks through the period of Sunday the 22nd through April the 7th, but that they be qualified to receive funding as that in Group number 3.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Everybody else, please vote. The motion passes unanimously.
And then finally, no, we have 2 more motions. We're talking about part-time, temporary. So are you asking the court, what are you asking the court to do?
They don't know, because I'm not sure we do.
Well, I thought I heard the judge say that we would discuss it. I didn't know that you meant now, but we can. All right. I thought it was
You thought you were gonna get lunch over there,
The
didn't you?
recommendation was to pay part-time temporaries. I so move.
And project.
And project.
And project.
And grants.
And grant-funded positions.
Okay, there's the motion.
Okay. So the motion is to pay grant employees, project temps, and regular part-time temps.
Right.
That's correct.
So was that a second?
Second.
Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Repeat the question if we're voting on.
So we're authorizing.
Okay, here we go.
Well, Commissioner Johnson, what the motion was that we authorize paying
Continuing to pay.
continue to pay project employees, temporary part-time, and grant.
And grant-funded.
And grant-funded employees. And that's staff recommendation.
I vote yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And so we have one other topic as relates to this issue, dealing with HR. Ms. Glenn and I have discussed this, and what we are requesting from the court is that we suspend new hire processing for 2 weeks with the following exceptions. And we have talked with the Sheriff's Department about this, that we process law enforcement personnel and any others that are identified and approved by the county administrator. We have already processed. Are we processing today the law enforcement?
Yes, sir. We have 11 that we're processing.
We're processing them today, and our next time that we're going to process for the SO scheduled process is going to be April 14th. So it'll be past this period. So, and we're working with Chief Driscoll and the Sheriff's Department on this, and they're in agreement with that.
And so they're the only exception?
Unless we find, and we're asking you all to authorize the county administrator to make an exception if we have someone outside of this.
Oh, okay, okay. The way that it sounded was that law enforcement was the exception as identified and approved by the court administrator. But you're saying law enforcement is one of the categories, but then there are others as identified and approved by your office.
That's correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
A motion to second. You know, I want to be sure. So basically, with your authority, with your approval, we can bring somebody in and not have to go through the employee orientation and get them to work right.
We would have to do that, but rather than scheduling it, because we'd have to we utilize a substantial number of HR employees to do this. We're asking for so that we can, basically work from home type deal, so we wouldn't have to bring those employees in. If we have a special situation, we'll bring them in for that orientation.
So you could do it daily if that's what it
I
takes.
can only speak up that if the court takes action on a request that I assume is on the agenda today for close for a court, if they're wanting that person to be able to start before this, they're
Right.
wanting them to be able to start Monday.
Believe me, yeah, if the court says if they take action on that, my direction's pretty clear.
We've got a guy that is going through the system to be hired in our maintenance department.
Yes, sir.
And we're waiting on the result of one of the tests.
Yes, sir.
And it's a drug test, and it's taken longer than expected. And my maintenance supervisor really doesn't want to lose this person.
We have conversations like that. If we're fearful we're going to lose an employee, well, then I would authorize that.
If we can find employees right now and we're trying to bring them in right now, they must be pretty essential. And I think this is what you're saying. Get them oriented and get them in here. And if we're doing one or if we're doing 100.
Yeah, the reason we're doing this is because if we're trying to take our current employees
and having them work from home, then we should be very careful about hiring new employees that may be non-essential and sending them right back home.
It's a capacity issue.
That's
We're
what
not
we're
even
doing.
having to pay them.
Okay, would you, we've got a motion and a second, but I don't know where it is on the agenda.
It is, get my agenda.
It's all part of,
Okay, so it would be item number 4. It would discussion possible action concerning activities associated with the impact of COVID-19 on Tarrant County citizens, businesses, and county government operations.
I believe we have a motion and second, but you don't look like we do. So I need a motion and second.
I do.
There was a motion and second.
Okay, any further discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Then finally, on the county administrator section, if we can go to item number 6. This is the one we pulled off the consent, but with clarification from the district attorney's office, we're ready to ask you to accept donations in total amount of $64,990.80 for the construction of Tarrant County Law Enforcement Memorial. These are from the North Texas Community Foundation and also the Sheriff's Foundation.
Motion from Commissioner.
Approval.
Motion from Commissioner Johnson.
Approval.
We got you, sir. He made the motion and seconded, but I think Commissioner Brooks also seconded it. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Tidwell, we're moving now.
We're requesting that the court approve the release of the $13 million of collateral as outlined in your court communication.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive the personnel agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We have 3 additional items. The next 2 items are waivers. The first request is from the district clerk's office. They're requesting a waiver of 258 vacation hours effective March the 25th. This amount that's being requested actually has been whittled down. We started at 394 vacation hours. The estimated cost to this action to the general fund is almost $1,700.
Is this an essential employee position? Why are we doing this?
Are you asking why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a 30-year employee that handled our intake, indictments. She had to leave to retire for various reasons, and we need to get somebody in that spot like pronto. This is a specialized area in the criminal division, and the grand juries are not working right now. She works grand jury indictments as well as intake and other things. But the grand juries, best of my knowledge, will likely start up again after April the 3rd. One of them is April 3rd, one of them is April 6th. So this will work
Do
out.
you already know the person you're going to move into that position?
We do.
And is that person, is what that person's job is doing right now, or are there multiple ones in there to take care of whatever she had been doing?
No.
So she's working.
We have 2 or 3 that are sort of being jockeyed around until we can get the person that we hope can absorb it quickly.
And again, I guess where I'm coming from is that I may be wrong, but the judges have certainly implied that the cases are, they're not running as many cases through. Now, I know you may still be getting them.
We are.
But I would sure like, we're fixing to spend a lot of money. I'd sure like if we can at all possible.
If I could have done that on this one, I would have. If it's anybody on that entire third floor that is essential, it's this person.
Okay. Do I have a motion or a second?
Move for approval.
I will second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So the next waiver is a request from Probate Court 2, Judge Allen. She's requesting a waiver of 392 vacation hours effective May 2nd. Her long-serving court coordinator, Chevron Small, is leaving county service. She's been here a very long time. She's leaving at the end of April. We're estimating the net cost to the general fund will be approximately $14,600.
If she's leaving at the end of April,
And the new employee is coming on board May 2nd, correct?
yeah, that's what it looks like to
me
me.
look.
I don't understand why we're doing this right now.
Let me read it.
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're reading it, let's not take action on it today.
Okay. We'll do that. And I believe I have one additional item, that's item 4. We're asking the court approval to double fill a position and a waiver. This request comes from Judge Wilkinson. Her court coordinator is leaving county service at the end of April. She's asking for double fill for a period of 30 days, and then the waiver 400 hours effective May 1st. We're estimating the cost to the general fund to be almost $18,000.
This is another one that I'm gonna be hard pressed to do supportive.
This is the one, and I can only speak because I've spoken with Judge Wilkinson on numerous occasions about this. Her court coordinator's been here 40 years, and she's retiring. And the auxiliary court coordinator is actually taking a job in another court, so they're having to go out into the marketplace and hire someone who I don't think has been a court coordinator other than as an auxiliary, as a substitute. They weren't an auxiliary, they were a substitute. And she feels very passionate about that. That's all I can share with you. I can share with you that those are the details, and that's one of the issues is this lady's been here for 40 years and has quite a bit of leave. And I actually think is taking some leave during that period of time.
5 weeks.
Yeah, taking the 5 weeks of leave, and also needing to train the other employee, but with the other employee taking the 5 weeks of leave, she wouldn't have anyone.
Well, but here's my question. If we're double filling the position,
It's because of the leave part of it.
well, but you also said it was because she needed to train them. Well, we're not gonna train them if she's not there.
She took 10 days, they have taken 10 days to train.
Right.
Substitute court reporter.
And then the rest of it is leave.
And the rest of it is leave.
So, let me just stand my position, as I've said it before. People should take it as they go through, and I don't like people taking off 2 or 3 months because they got time to burn. And you ought to be taking it along the way.
I will tell you that I've had this conversation with Melody, and she said that when she came, obviously, she inherited a situation from previous justices where the employee had a lot of time, that she's forced her to whittle it down, but again, after 40 years, the employee had a large amount of time. And that the other comment that she made was that she'd already approved that all she was gonna get all year, because initially I don't think the lady was retiring as early as she is, was that Melody had only told her she could have the 5 weeks of leave that she earned this year, so that her balances didn't increase. And then maybe because of the virus, maybe because of something else, the lady went ahead and decided to retire.
I'd like to put in that this woman, the person who's retiring,
is not, I don't believe she's at work today, because she was, can I say?
Probably nothing, so just say it.
Right, but she's not at work today. So 17th Court is without a court coordinator from this point, from a week ago on out.
What you told me here that makes me be willing to do this is that Judge Wilkerson only let her take 5 weeks, which is this year's deal.
And when she came onto the bench, the existing employee had, I believe, 1,600 hours of vacation, and she has had her whittle it down to 600.
Well, and I will tell you that I had one that had over close to 2,000, and we whittled it down, but she ended up losing a lot. And just as this lady, I think, is going to lose a lot.
She will lose some, yes.
Thank you. Do we have a motion or a second? I will move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. You want to take care of Vinnie's?
Yes. Though purchasing is next, I'll do public. No, I didn't.
Well, I think public health comes before purchasing, at least according to my agenda.
Members, Court, if we can go to public health I-1. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve a grant application to the Texas Department of State Health Services for the purpose of governmental public health emergency response.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Beecham, come on down, but don't stay long.
We have 21 items for your consideration this morning.
Pick your favorites.
Can we pass 1 through 5 all at the same time?
Yes. Which one are the essentials?
They didn't laugh at that, so I guess that was a no. So go ahead. Go ahead, Jack.
5 items for your consideration this morning. Item 1, bid award recommendation for RFP 2020-054, annual contract for mainframe application support for the Information Technology Department. Recommendation be awarded to data management for the terms of the contract. If approved, we're also seeking contract approval.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Number 2, bid award recommendation for bid 2020-062, annual contract for Appian licenses, again for the IT department. Recommendation be to award to GXP Partners on a per unit price basis.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Number 3, bid award recommendation for bid 2020-091. This is our semi-annual contract for copy paper, envelopes, and other related products. Recommendation be to award a per unit price basis, awarding to the primary and secondary vendors meeting all specifications.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 4, bid award recommendation for bid 2020-097, annual contract for electrical services. Recommendation be to award on a per hourly labor rate, markup for parts, awarding to the 5 primary vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Last item in regards to RFP 2020-052, an RFP for the administration of the alternate dispute resolution system. We are recommending rejection of both proposals and seeking permission to rebid with revised specifications.
Move approval.
Second, but I have a question. I thought this was already decided. Am I confusing it with something else?
No, in this one here, we had done an RFP. We had several proposals, but we would like to reject both of them and rebid.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Jack. Commissioner Brooks, I believe you have an interlocal agreement?
I have an interlocal agreement, item 8M1A and B. It's with the city of Everman. I'd like to ask for approval of the interlocal agreement, although the work will not commence until after we come out of this work shutdown.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments?
No, but I do have a question about with our boards and commissions, especially those that are required to have meetings, instruction on how they're having those meetings, right? Like, I don't know if by statute some are required to have certain, to have regular meetings.
I would suggest that if they're required to happen and they happen, that they happen hopefully by teleconference. And if they're out of our area, then they may be restricted by our travel. So they may not be able to.
I don't know of any of them that by statute have to meet. I mean, they have to perform a function. I don't know if there's a requirement that they have a monthly meeting.
Well, I would just like an update on
So-
what they are,
Okay,
what they are doing.
and
It didn't
let
have to happen a day.
Let me give you some information on what we're doing internally with some of our other committees. What we're doing is that because of not wanting to get a group in a room, so we have canceled almost all of our in-person meetings. I know we have one that the Historical Commission, we're going to direct them not to have their meeting.
Which one was that? I'm sorry.
Historical Commission. Any meetings that we have, including my department head meetings, if we have those, we do those by telephonic meetings, and we're encouraging that. I think as we go through the next 2 weeks, we will probably not have any meetings at all because of the work at home document.
Okay.
Also, the TRVA board meeting has been canceled because of the COVID-19 issue, and most of the meetings that I normally go to outside of the office, they've all been canceled.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move to the claims, approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We've already had our briefing items. I'm going to make one comment because we've had one question come in that I think it's very important that we address. There was a question about Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, and those particular types of things. I'm going to say that those actually fall under essential healthcare services, and it talks about substance abuse providers, and I'm going to make the statement that it will cover there, and if it doesn't cover there, then we'll amend the thing to make it cover there.
So the judges have received notice in the last few days that there's an online AA to deal with all those issues right now. So there are other alternatives.
And I appreciate that, but some of these folks may not have the ability to do online. My interpretation of my order right now would say that they would fall under substance abuse providers, and it might, that's where I'm just going to stop it and say that. And then if they beat me up too bad, then we may do a clarification of that order at some point in time. With that, I'm going to recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempt under Section 551. 071, 072, 074, 076, and 086, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Say it again?
No.
Oh, he's not. Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to, wait a minute, Wait a minute, we may have business after all.
Your Honor, we could go to, under the Administrator's section, item A4, and this concerns out-of-state travel. And what we would like to recommend that the court, except for those trips that are within the course and scope of a person's duty, that we postpone or cancel out-of-state trips until further notified by the Commissioner's Court.
So moved.
A motion is second. We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Johnson not present at this time.
That's all I have. Yes, sir.
One other question I guess that I would ask, the interviews with the JPS folks, as much as I don't want to delay anything on that deal, I think we can't be bringing those folks in here when we're telling everybody else to stay home.
Yeah.
So I think we have to postpone until.
We'll reschedule.
Okay. And then I would ask that, again, with regard to item 4, that we begin to think about and have Helen also think about it, but setting up some sort of a reserve or some sort of a fund so that we got a lot of nonprofits that are doing a lot of great work. They can't basically stand the kind of hardships that this may create on them. I think most of it will be reimbursed, but if it's not, then we'll have to figure out what we're going to do at that point in time. But I think we've got to do it, and we may think, be thinking about it. I'm thinking in terms of the undesignated that we had, which is about $5 million. And if we get close to, we've used a lot of that today. We're on schedule to use a lot of it, but let's at least begin.
Judge, also, I got a call from Mary Keene at Metroport Meals on Wheels because the restaurants are closed and limited service. She gets most of her food from mom and small restaurants, not Chili's and the chain restaurants. And they're really struggling to get her food for the 400 people that they feed.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look at that, and we can begin talking with our nonprofits.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned one about dental services.
Yeah, Dental Health Arlington, and then also the Tarrant Area Food Bank. And then I know we've had so many discussions with our superintendents, and right now the school districts who are able to provide meals Monday through Friday, but then that still leaves the weekend. So we do need to be talking about supplemental food.
And we'll start, on the calls that we're having now every other day, we may need to start bringing up with them. I think getting the food is going to, even though the food supply is there, it's going to be a matter of getting it, just as in some of the situations that we've talked about. The food bank would be the best thing. We just need to make sure the food bank, and most of it should be reimbursable by this COVID-19, but you know how the federal and state governments are, and Russell's running up here to tell me that something else is going on. Any comments regarding that statement? I don't think there is.
Okay, let us step back just a second.
Okay. You don't like item 6 of my little statement, or somebody's statement?
I'll be Glenn Hagan.
That's all we have, Your Honor.
There being no further business, we're adjourned. Are we going to try?